Hey there, story lovers. This is Revenger What If, and we're bringing you an epic adventure. What if Naruto was a nomad vampire who entered Forks and Alice, Rosalie, and Bella all fell in love? Hit like, subscribe, and let's begin this journey. Chapter 1, The Stranger in the Rain. The rain in Forks didn't fall so much as it settled, a permanent grey weight that pressed down on the town like a hand on a sleeping chest. It had been raining for 11 days straight, which the locals didn't bother commenting on because that was just October in the Olympic Peninsula. The forests drank it in. The roads slicked with it. The sky and ground blurred until you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Naruto Uzumaki walked out of the tree line at the northern edge of town just past 2 in the afternoon, though you wouldn't know the time by looking at the sky. He'd been walking for 3 days through the deep old-growth forest that blanketed the mountains, moving at a human pace because he liked the way the moss smelled when it was soaked and because there was nobody out here to perform speed for. His clothes were damp but not soaked, a dark canvas jacket over a black Henley, worn jeans, boots that had seen better decades. A small pack hung from one shoulder, half empty. He didn't need much. Hadn't needed much in a very long time. He stopped at the tree line and looked down at the town. Forks, Washington. Population something small. A main street that looked like it had been built in the 70s and hadn't been renovated since, a handful of traffic lights, a diner, a high school, a police station, a general store. The kind of place people came from, not the kind they came to. Naruto tilted his head, rainwater running down the sharp lines of his jaw. He looked young, mid-20s, maybe, with a face that sat somewhere between boyish and weathered, like someone who smiled often but had reasons not to. Sun-gold hair darkened by the rain, 3 thin scars on each cheek that looked like old whisker marks, blue eyes so vivid they almost glowed. Almost. He could feel them. Not the humans, though he could feel them too, their heartbeats a low collective murmur like distant drums. No. What stopped him at the tree line was the other thing. A cool, crystalline frequency woven through the town's fabric. Vampires. Multiple. Established. The scent was faint and controlled, layered under years of careful coexistence, but to someone like Naruto it was as obvious as a bonfire in a dark field. He could also feel something else, something hot, wild, earthy. Coming from the reservation to the west. Shapeshifters, maybe. Something old tied to the land. Ha, he said aloud, to nobody. He'd been aiming for the coast. Just wanted to see the Pacific again, maybe sit on a beach for a few days and listen to the waves. He hadn't planned on stopping in any town, let alone one that was apparently a supernatural crossroads. But his feet were already carrying him down the slope toward the main road, and Naruto had learned a long time ago to trust his feet. The diner was called Carver Cafe, and it sat on the main drag like a warm lamp in a gray window. Naruto pushed through the door and a little bell chimed overhead. The interior was all worn wood and red vinyl booths, the air thick with coffee and grease and the quiet conversations of maybe 15 people. A jukebox in the corner played something by Fleetwood Mac at a volume that suggested it was more furniture than entertainment. Every head turned when he walked in. Not dramatically, Forks was small, but it wasn't a western. People just glanced up from their plates, registered a stranger, held the look a beat too long, and went back to eating. A waitress with a name tag that read Cora gave him a once-over and a nod toward the counter. Anywhere you like, Hond menus on the table. Naruto slid onto a stool at the counter and set his pack on the floor between his feet. He picked up the laminated menu and studied it with the genuine interest of someone who hadn't eaten human food in about 40 years but remembered loving it. Coffee, please, he said when Cora circled back. And, do you still do a good cheeseburger? Best in Clallam County. She poured his coffee without waiting for confirmation. You passing through? That's the plan. Hiking? Something like that. She set the mug in front of him and he wrapped both hands around it, letting the heat soak in. He could feel the warmth, though his body didn't need it. It was comfort, not function. Like most of the human rituals he still practiced. He was 3 sips into the coffee when the door opened again and 2 people walked in, a middle-aged man in a police uniform and a girl of about 17 with long dark hair and a face that was trying very hard to look like she didn't mind the rain. Naruto's hands went still around the mug. The girl was human. Obviously, completely, heartbreakingly human. But there was something around her, a shimmer that wasn't visible so much as felt, like a pane of glass between her mind and the rest of the world. A shield. Subtle, unconscious, and remarkably strong. He'd encountered psychic defenses before, vampires who could block mental intrusion, gifted humans with latent abilities, but this girl's shield was different. It wasn't trained or intentional. It was just there, like an extra organ, functioning perfectly without her knowledge. Interesting. The man in the uniform, Chief Swan, based on the badge, steered them toward a booth near the window. The girl slid in across from him and immediately pulled out her phone, then seemed to think better of it and set it face down on the table. You can text him back, Bells. I'm not gonna throw a fit. I wasn't texting anyone. Sure. The chief picked up his menu, which he clearly had memorized, and studied it like it contained new information. Naruto went back to his coffee. The cheeseburger arrived and he ate it slowly, tasting each component with the careful attention of someone rediscovering an old pleasure. The beef was overcooked, the bun was slightly stale, and the cheese was the processed kind that came in individual plastic sleeves. It was wonderful. He was halfway through when he felt eyes on him. Not the casual glances of the other diners, a direct, curious, sustained look. He turned his head and met the gaze of the girl in the booth. She looked away immediately, a flush climbing her cheeks. Naruto grinned. He couldn't help it. There was something genuinely funny about a human girl in a town full of vampires being embarrassed about getting caught staring at another vampire. He picked up his plate and his coffee and, because his feet were telling him to again, walked over to their booth. Mind if I sit? Counter's kind of lonely. Chief Swan looked up, and Naruto watched the cop's eyes do their professional sweep, clothes, build, hands, eyes, threat assessment. Naruto let him look. He had centuries of practice at appearing exactly as dangerous as a friendly stranger in a diner ought to appear. Help yourself, Charlie said after a moment, gesturing to the empty space next to Bella. Naruto slid in and set his plate down. Thanks. I'm Naruto. Charlie Swan. This is my daughter, Bella. Naruto. Bella repeated. The flush was fading, replaced by genuine curiosity. That's Japanese. It is. You don't look Japanese. I get that a lot. He took a bite of his burger. My mother was, complicated. The name stuck. Are you new in town? Charlie asked, and there was that professional edge again, the police chief who noticed strangers. Just passing through. I've been hiking the peninsula. Thought I'd stop somewhere with a roof and a hot meal before heading for the coast. In October? Bella raised an eyebrow. It's been raining for almost 2 weeks. I don't mind rain. Grew up somewhere that was sunny all the time. Got sick of it. This was a lie, the hidden leaf had experienced every kind of weather, but it made them both smile. Where are you from originally? Charlie asked. A very small village. You wouldn't have heard of it. This was true. It doesn't exist anymore. This was also true, and the way he said it, lightly, easily, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, made Bella tilt her head. I'm sorry, she said. It was a long time ago. He dipped a fry in ketchup and pointed it at her. What about you? You don't sound like you're from here either. Phoenix, originally. I moved here to live with my dad about a year ago. Phoenix to Forks. That's a change. You have no idea. I might. He ate the fry. Sunshine to rain is a big adjustment. But there's something about this place, right? The forests here feel old. Like they remember things. Bella went quiet for a second. Her eyes, brown, serious, too perceptive for a 17-year-old, searched his face. Yeah, she said slowly. They do. Charlie was watching the exchange with the mildly suspicious expression of a father who'd already dealt with one supernaturally attractive young man paying attention to his daughter. You got a place to stay tonight? I'll figure something out. There's a motel off the highway. The Lodge. It's not fancy, but it's dry. I appreciate that, Chief. The bell over the door chimed again. Naruto didn't need to turn around. He felt it, that cold crystalline frequency, suddenly close and focused. A vampire had just walked into the diner. One of the established ones, the ones woven into the town's fabric. Bella's face changed. It was subtle, a softening around her eyes, a slight tension in her shoulders, the involuntary response of someone whose body recognized another person before her brain caught up. Edward, she said, and there was a whole world in the way she said it. Naruto turned. The vampire standing just inside the door was exactly what he expected and nothing like it at the same time. Young-looking, beautiful in that sharp immortal way, bronze hair artfully disheveled, golden eyes that marked him as an animal drinker. He was dressed like a catalog model trying to blend in at a public school, which was both impressive and faintly ridiculous. But what struck Naruto wasn't the appearance, it was the intensity. This vampire radiated control the way a clenched fist radiated tension. Everything about him was held tight, managed, curated. And he was staring at Naruto with an expression of pure, undisguised confusion. Naruto understood immediately. Mind reader. Had to be. And right now that mind reader was reaching out toward Naruto's thoughts and finding nothing. Not a shield, not static, not resistance. Just a vast, warm, golden silence that went down and down and down without end. Hey, Edward. Bella waved him over, oblivious to the silent exchange happening above the frequency of human perception. Edward crossed the diner in smooth strides, his eyes never leaving Naruto. He slid into the booth next to Bella, and she leaned into him instinctively. His arm went around her, but his attention was locked forward. Edward, this is Naruto. He's hiking through the area. Naruto, this is Edward Cullen. My boyfriend. Nice to meet you. Naruto extended a hand across the table. Edward took it. The moment their palms touched, Naruto felt Edward's grip test him, a subtle squeeze, a fraction harder than a human handshake, probing for response. Naruto matched his grip exactly. Not harder, not softer. A mirror. Then he let go and picked up his coffee like nothing had happened. Edward's jaw tightened. Likewise. Naruto was telling us about his hike, Charlie said, apparently deciding that one uncomfortable boyfriend at his table was plenty but two was worth monitoring. The peninsula's beautiful country, Edward said smoothly. His voice was polished, controlled. Though the weather can be unforgiving this time of year. That's what makes it interesting. Naruto leaned back. I like places that don't make it easy. The easy places, the tropical islands, the Mediterranean coast, they're beautiful, but they don't ask anything of you. Forests like these, they ask you to pay attention. You've traveled a lot, Bella said. A bit. How old are you? Edward asked. The question was pointed, and Naruto could see Bella glance at Edward with a slight frown, hearing something in the tone that Charlie wouldn't. Older than I look, Naruto said. He met Edward's gaze and held it, and there was a flicker, just a flicker, of something ancient and golden in the blue of his eyes. A half second that said, I know what you are. I know what you're trying to do. It's okay. I'm not here for trouble. Edward went very still. Well, Naruto said, pushing his empty plate forward and standing. He dropped a 20 on the table, more than enough for a cheeseburger and coffee. I should find that motel before it gets dark. Chief, thanks for the company. Bella, it was really nice meeting you. You too, Bella said, and she meant it. He grabbed his pack, nodded to Cora behind the counter, and walked out into the rain. He was halfway across the parking lot when he heard the diner door open and close behind him. Footsteps, too light, too fast, too precise. You should stop by our house. Edward's voice was even, but there was something coiled beneath it. My father would be interested to meet you. Naruto stopped walking and turned. Edward stood in the rain without an umbrella, water beating on his skin and hair, looking like a Renaissance painting of a very tense angel. Would he? He studies people like us. He's a doctor. He's been doing this for a long time. Not as long as me. The words hung in the rain between them. Edward's golden eyes narrowed. What are you? Edward asked, and the polish was gone now. This was the real question, stripped bare. Naruto studied him for a long moment. The rain fell. A car hissed past on the wet road behind them. I'm just a guy who's been walking for a while, Naruto said. Tell your father I'll stop by. But not because you're asking me to, because I'm curious about a vampire coven that drinks animal blood and sends their kids to public high school. That's new for me, and not a lot of things are new for me anymore. He turned and walked away. Behind him, he could feel Edward standing in the rain, watching, trying one more time to push into his mind, and finding only that warm golden nothing. Naruto smiled to himself. This town was more interesting than the coast. He didn't go to the motel. Instead, Naruto walked north out of town until the buildings thinned and the forest swallowed the road, and then he stepped off the asphalt and into the trees. The canopy closed over him like a cathedral ceiling, massive Sitka spruce and western red cedar, their trunks wider than cars, their branches draped with moss that hung like green curtains in the rain. The light, already dim, dropped to almost nothing. A human would have been blind. Naruto could see everything. Every droplet on every needle, every spider web strung between branches, every small creature huddled in its burrow waiting for the rain to stop. His vision in darkness wasn't the flat thermal imaging of an animal or the sharp monochrome of a typical vampire, it was full, rich, detailed, tinged at the edges with gold. A gift from the old fox, fused into his cells alongside everything else that made him what he was. He found a massive fallen cedar, dead for maybe a century, its trunk hollowed by decay, and climbed inside. It was dry in there, and it smelled like old wood and earth. He sat with his back against the inner wall, set his pack beside him, and closed his eyes. He didn't need to sleep. Hadn't needed to in over 800 years. But he could meditate, could go inward in a way that was better than sleep, and right now he wanted to sit with what he'd felt in that town. The vampires, at least 7 of them, from what he could sense, were unusual. Animal drinkers. Settled. Integrated. The mind reader was the youngest, probably only a century or so, all sharp edges and intensity. There were older ones in the group. One very old, by Twilight vampire standards, 3, maybe 4 centuries. The patriarch, likely. The Dr. Edward had mentioned. Then there were the shapeshifters on the reservation. Wolf-tied, spirit-bonded, burning hot where the vampires ran cold. A treaty of some kind between the two groups. Naruto could feel the boundary like a scar in the earth, an invisible line that both sides respected. And then there was the girl. Bella. He breathed out slowly and let his awareness expand, a pulse of warm golden energy that radiated outward from his chest like sonar. It moved through the forest, gentle, barely perceptible, a fox walking through tall grass. He wasn't searching for anything specific. He was just feeling the place, learning its shape, the way he always did when he arrived somewhere new. His awareness touched the edges of the town. Human lives, small and warm, flickering like candles. The police station. The school. The hospital, where one of the vampire signatures pulsed steadily, the doctor, working a shift. A house on the river, isolated, expensive, where several vampire signatures clustered together. The family home. They were gathering, and there was agitation in the air. The mind reader had come home and told them what he'd found. Good. Let them talk. He'd go see them tomorrow. His awareness pushed further, past the town, into the deep forest to the east, and he opened his eyes. There was something else out there. Not the wolves, not the Cullen coven. Something fast and feral and angry, moving through the forest about 40 miles to the southeast. A vampire, running alone, circling the area in wide arcs like a shark circling a boat. Red-eyed. Hungry. Fixated. Naruto felt the shape of that fixation and understood it immediately. He'd seen it before, the obsessive, single-minded drive of a vampire on a hunt. Not hunting for food. Hunting for revenge. Whatever it was being careful. Staying outside the wolves' range, outside the Cullen's patrol patterns. Watching. Waiting. Well, Naruto murmured in the hollow of the dead tree, that's not great. He filed it away and settled back. Whatever that was, it wasn't his problem. He was passing through. He'd meet the Cullens, satisfy his curiosity, and move on. That was the plan. Plans, in his experience, rarely survived contact with interesting people. 20 miles south, in a house that looked like it had been designed by a very ambitious architect who'd been given an unlimited budget and a love of glass, the Cullen family was doing something they hadn't done in years, arguing. He's a threat. Rosalie's voice was flat and certain. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room, arms crossed, golden hair catching the lamplight like a weapon. A nomad walks into our territory and the first thing he does is sit down with Bella. With Charlie. He sat down with them because it's a diner and there were empty seats, Rose. Emmett was sprawled on the couch, looking entirely too relaxed for the tension in the room. That's kind of what people do in diners. He's not people. Neither are we, last time I checked. Enough. Carlyle stood near the fireplace, though there was no fire burning. He didn't need the warmth, but he liked the way the hearth anchored a room. He was a man, a vampire, who valued anchors. Blonde, calm-faced, 360-odd years of existence wearing on him with the lightness of a well-tailored coat. Edward, tell us again. Exactly. Edward stood apart from the rest of them, near the piano, one hand resting on its closed lid. He hadn't sat down since he'd come home. I couldn't hear him. At all. Like Bella? Esme asked softly from the armchair by the window. No. Bella is, it's like a wall. A shield. I push and there's nothing to grip. This was different. Edward paused, searching for words. With Bella, there's silence because I can't get in. With him, there's silence because there's nothing to hear. Or, no. That's not right either. There was something. I could feel it, the way you can feel heat from a fire without touching it. It was warm. Vast. Like standing at the edge of something enormous and looking down and not being able to see the bottom. The room was quiet. He knew what I was doing, Edward continued. The moment I tried to read him, he knew, and he wasn't bothered by it. He wasn't blocking me. I wasn't relevant enough to block. Jasper shifted in his seat. He'd been silent, his face tight with concentration. I felt him too, he said. When Edward described him, I extended my ability toward the diner on instinct. I was a mile away, and I shouldn't have been able to reach that far with any precision. But he was, loud. Emotionally loud. Aggressive? Carlyle asked. No. The opposite. Jasper looked uncomfortable in a way that was unusual for him. He felt like a campfire. Warm. Steady. Old. Not old like us, old like mountains. And underneath it, there was, it's hard to describe. There was grief, but it was held gently. Like something he'd been carrying for so long it had become part of him rather than a burden. And there was loneliness, but not the desperate kind. The patient kind. The kind that comes from someone who chose it. See? Emmett said. Campfire. Harmless. A campfire that Edward couldn't read and Jasper could feel from a mile away, Rosalie shot back. That's not harmless. That's unknown, and unknown is dangerous. Rose. Carlyle's voice was gentle but firm. I understand your concern. But fear of the unknown isn't a reason to treat a stranger as a threat. It literally is, Carlyle. That's the entire evolutionary purpose of the fear response. She has a point, Emmett said. Rosalie glared at him. He grinned. What? You do. I'm agreeing with you. He told Edward he'd come see us, Alice said. Everyone turned to look at her. She was perched on the window seat at the far end of the room, her legs drawn up, her chin resting on her knees. She'd been quiet since the conversation started, unusually quiet for Alice, who typically drove family discussions with the cheerful momentum of a small, well-dressed freight train. Her eyes were distant, slightly unfocused, the way they got when she was seeing something. Alice? Carlyle prompted. He's going to come here. Tomorrow. In the afternoon. She blinked and her focus sharpened, but there was something strange in her expression, a softness, a fascination, almost a hunger that had nothing to do with blood. I've been trying to see him since Edward called. I can't, it's not like the wolves, where the future just goes blank. It's more like looking at the sun through water. I can see something, but it keeps shifting, and it's so bright. I keep getting these flashes, golden light, and warmth, and, she stopped. And what? Rosalie asked. And a feeling, Alice said quietly. Like something I've been waiting for. The silence that followed was loaded. Edward shifted. Jasper's face was unreadable. Alice, Jasper said, and there was something careful in the way he said her name. Not jealous, Jasper didn't operate that way. Concerned. Curious. Wary. I know, she said. I know what it sounds like. I'm just telling you what I see. What I feel. We all know my visions are subjective, and this one is more subjective than usual. She uncurled and stood, and the lightness returned to her posture like a coat being shrugged on. But he's coming here, and we should be ready. Not for a fight. For a conversation. I agree, Carlyle said. We'll receive him here, in good faith. He's a nomad in our territory, and the courteous thing to do is exactly what we do for any visitor, welcome him, learn his intentions, and proceed accordingly. And if his intentions are hostile? Rosalie asked. They won't be, Alice said. You just told us you can barely see him. I know. But I know. Alice smiled, and there was something electric in it, something lit from inside. He's not hostile. He's just, different. And I want to understand how. Rosalie looked at her for a long moment, then shook her head and turned back to the window. This is going to end badly. Your optimism continues to inspire us all, Rose, Emmett said, and ducked the pillow she threw at him without looking. Naruto spent the night in the hollow tree, meditating. When he went inward like this, truly deep, the landscape of his own mind hadn't changed much in 8 centuries. It was still a sewer, that long, flooded corridor with pipes running along the ceiling and water ankle-deep on the floor. He'd been offered metaphysical renovations by a dozen different psychics and shamans over the centuries, but he'd always declined. The sewer was home. It was where he'd first met Kurama. Changing it would feel like repainting your childhood bedroom. The cage was still there too, but the door had been open for a very long time. The massive fox, 9 tails, fur like living fire, eyes like red suns, was gone. Had been gone since the night Naruto was turned. Kurama's chakra had fused with the vampiric venom in Naruto's bloodstream and become something new, something that was neither demon nor vampire but both. Naruto carried it as a golden warmth in his chest, a sunbright energy that flowed through his veins alongside the venom. He missed the old fox. 800 years, and he still missed him. Missed the grumbling, the insults, the reluctant affection. Kurama had been his oldest friend and the closest thing he had to family for the first 17 years of his life. Losing him, even to a fusion rather than a death, had been the first great grief. The second had been watching everyone else die. Sakura. Sasuke. Kakashi-sensei. Tsunade-bachan. Shikamaru. All of them, one by one, claimed by time while Naruto walked on unchanged. He'd stayed in the elemental nations for as long as he could bear it, nearly a century after the last person who knew his name had died, before the grief drove him across an ocean he didn't know existed, into a world he didn't recognize. 8 centuries of wandering after that. Europe during the Black Plague. China under the Ming Dynasty. The shores of West Africa, the frozen plains of Siberia, the jungles of South America. He'd met other vampires, hundreds of them, of the cold, diamond-skin variety that seemed to be the only kind this world produced naturally. He'd learned their rules, their politics, their hierarchies. The Volturi in Italy, who styled themselves kings and kept the peace through fear. The nomads who drifted like him. The covens that settled and pretended to be human. None of them were like him. He was the only chakra-fused vampire in existence, the only one who could walk in sunlight without sparkling like a disco ball, who could go months without feeding, who carried an internal energy source that made him faster, stronger, and more durable than any vampire he'd ever encountered. He didn't advertise this. Not because he was hiding, but because it wasn't interesting to him. Power was only interesting when you didn't have it. What was interesting was people. Even after 800 years, people fascinated him. The way they loved, fought, hoped, grieved, built things, burned them down, and built them again. Humans and vampires alike. That fascination was the only thing that kept the loneliness from becoming despair. He surfaced from his meditation as dawn light began filtering through the hollow tree. Gray and soft, hardly light at all by most standards, but Naruto could feel the sun behind the clouds. His skin prickled with it, a faint, pleasant warmth, like standing near a fire. If the clouds broke, his skin would glow gold. Not the diamond refraction of a traditional vampire, something warmer, softer, like light was coming from inside him rather than bouncing off a crystalline surface. It was one of the many things that made other vampires uneasy. He climbed out of the tree, stretched, another unnecessary human gesture that he enjoyed, and started walking toward town. Forks High School was exactly what he expected, a cluster of low buildings surrounded by parking lots, everything damp, everything gray-green, teenagers moving between buildings with the hunched urgency of people who hated rain but had accepted its permanence. Naruto perched on a low branch at the forest's edge and watched, not because he intended to spy, but because the rhythm of a high school morning was one of those human things that still charmed him after centuries. He spotted the Cullen cars immediately, a silver Volvo and a red BMW convertible that had no business being in a high school parking lot. 5 vampires emerged. The mind reader, Edward. A massive one who moved like a friendly bear, Emmett, probably. A blonde who looked like she'd been carved from ice and fury, Rosalie, he guessed. A lean, scarred one who moved with the careful precision of a soldier, interesting, that one. A combat veteran. And Alice. She was small. That was his first thought. Small and dark-haired and moving with a dancer's grace, every step precise and light, like gravity was a suggestion she'd chosen to loosely follow. She was wearing a charcoal jacket over something that looked expensive and impractical for a high school, and she was smiling at something the big one said, and she stopped. Mid-step, mid-smile, she stopped. Her head turned toward the tree line with the slow, locked precision of a compass needle finding north. Her golden eyes swept the forest edge, searching, and for a moment Naruto could have sworn they locked directly onto his position, hidden in the branches and the rain and the shadows. A flash of gold light pulsed through his awareness. Not from him, from her. A vision, firing in real time. She was seeing him, right now, in whatever fractured way her gift could manage. Naruto held still and let her look. After a long moment, Alice smiled, not the easy social smile she'd been wearing before, but something private and wondering, like a child finding a door in a wall where no door should be, and turned back to her family. She said something to Edward that made him glance sharply toward the tree line. By the time he looked, Naruto had already moved. He spent the morning in the forest. Not hiding, exploring. The Olympic Peninsula old growth was genuinely beautiful, and he hadn't been in a temperate rainforest in decades. He ran for a while at his real speed, and the trees blurred into green-gray smears and the rain hung suspended in the air around him like he was moving through a frozen photograph. He climbed a Sitka spruce that was over 200 feet tall and sat in its crown, swaying in the wind above the canopy, looking out over miles of unbroken forest and the gray line of the Pacific in the distance. From up there, he could feel the vampire circling to the southeast again. Closer today. Tighter orbits. Whatever she was waiting for, and Naruto was fairly certain it was a she, her patience was thinning. He dropped from the tree, fell 200 feet through branches and rain, and landed on the forest floor in a crouch that barely disturbed the moss. Then he went to meet the Cullens. The house was impressive, he had to admit. Glass and wood and clean modern lines, set in a clearing by the river, surrounded by forest on three sides. It looked like something out of a magazine for people who had too much money and extremely good taste. The driveway was long and private, and Naruto walked up it openly, hands in his jacket pockets, making no effort to conceal his approach. They were waiting for him. He could feel all 7 of them inside. The 2 at school had come home early, apparently. The emotional temperature of the house, even from outside, was a complicated stew: curiosity, anxiety, hostility, fascination, calm. He climbed the porch steps and knocked on the door. It opened almost immediately. The man standing there was blond, handsome, and radiated a composure that came from either deep wisdom or extremely good acting. 300+ years old, based on the depth of the scent. Golden eyes, warm but assessing. This was the patriarch. "Hello," Carlyle said. "You must be our visitor. I'm Carlyle Cullen. Please, come in." Naruto. "And thanks, I appreciate the invitation." He stepped through the door and the 7 vampire signatures washed over him like walking into a room full of humming electrical equipment. His own energy pulsed in response, a warm, involuntary flare that he didn't bother suppressing, and he felt every vampire in the house register it. The living room was open and airy, all windows and pale wood. They'd arranged themselves with a casualness that was almost certainly rehearsed, Emmett on the couch, Rosalie standing behind him with a hand on his shoulder, territorial, Naruto noted, Edward by the piano, a woman with caramel-colored hair and a kind face near the kitchen, Esme, he assumed, and the soldier, Jasper, standing near Alice by the staircase. Alice, who was looking at him like he was a book written in a language she'd been trying to learn her whole life. "Thank you all for having me," Naruto said, and he meant it. "I know a nomad showing up unannounced isn't exactly a welcome development." "We get nomads occasionally," Carlyle said, gesturing toward a chair. "Though I confess, you've generated more discussion than most. Edward tells me you have some unusual qualities. Edward tells you he couldn't read my mind and it spooked him." Naruto sat. The chair was comfortable. "Which, fair. I'd be spooked too." He looked at Edward. "Sorry about that, by the way. It's not intentional. My mind just doesn't work the way yours does." "What way does it work?" Edward asked. Loudly. Emmett snorted. Rosalie's grip on his shoulder tightened. "May I ask what you are?" Carlyle leaned forward in his chair, and the scholarly hunger in his eyes was genuine. This was a man, a vampire, who had spent centuries studying his own kind and still found new questions. Naruto liked him immediately. "I'm a vampire. Just not the same kind as you." "There's only one kind," Rosalie said. Her voice was cool and hard. "There's only one kind here," Naruto corrected gently. "The world is bigger than you think, and it's older than any of us. I was made differently. A long time ago, in a place that doesn't exist anymore, by a process that involved, let's call it a merging of two incompatible things." "Venom and something else?" Carlyle asked. "Venom and energy. The living kind." The room was quiet. Naruto could feel Jasper reaching toward him with that empathic ability, tasting his emotional landscape, and he let him. He had nothing to hide. "You mentioned you're old," Carlyle said carefully. "How old, if you don't mind?" "I was born in 1197, by the calendar you use. Turned at 17. So, roughly 829 years, give or take." Something shifted in the room. Even Carlyle, who had met vampires older than himself many times, reacted, a slight widening of the eyes, a recalculation happening behind his careful composure. 8 centuries was old. Not the oldest, the Volturi leaders were older, but old enough to command a certain gravity. "You don't act like an 800-year-old vampire," Emmett said. "How should an 800-year-old vampire act?" "I don't know. Creepier." Naruto laughed. It was genuine and bright and completely at odds with the tension in the room, and he watched it land like a stone in a still pond, ripples of surprise moving through each of them. Vampires, in his experience, laughed performatively. Polished chuckles, dry humor, sophisticated amusement. Naruto laughed like a person who just heard something funny. "I'll work on it," he said. "But no, I know what you mean. The old ones, the Volturi, the Romanians, they get formal. Stiff. They start treating every conversation like a chess game. I think it's because they stopped interacting with humans. When you only talk to other immortals, you lose the, I don't know. The looseness. The ability to just be in a moment without calculating 3 moves ahead. You interact with humans." Rosalie's tone was pointed. "Like you did yesterday with Bella Swan." "I ate a cheeseburger in a diner and made conversation. I wasn't stalking her. She's involved with Edward." "Okay." Naruto's voice was easy, unbothered. He looked at Rosalie directly, and she met his gaze with the defiance of someone who was used to her beauty being either weaponized or worshipped and hadn't figured out what to do when someone just looked at her like she was a regular person. "I'm not here for your brother's girlfriend, Rosalie. I'm not here for anyone's anything. I'm a guy who walked into a town and found it more interesting than he expected." "What makes it interesting?" Alice asked. He turned to her. She was leaning forward slightly, her small frame vibrating with a barely contained energy that he could feel like static electricity. Her golden eyes were wide and searching and utterly unguarded. Jasper, beside her, was watching the exchange with a careful stillness. "You do," Naruto said. "All of you. A coven of animal drinkers who live among humans, who go to school, who've built something that looks like a family instead of a power structure. In 800 years, I've never seen anything like it." "You've never met vegetarian vampires?" Carlyle asked. "I've met vampires who abstain from human blood. I've never met ones who did it as a family philosophy. That's different. That's," he paused, choosing his words. "That's hopeful. And hope is rare in our world." Esme made a soft sound, not quite a word, more like a breath that carried feeling. Naruto glanced at her and saw her eyes glistening in a way that vampires' eyes shouldn't be able to. "You said you could demonstrate," Edward said, "and there was a challenge in it. Not hostile, exactly, but testing. Yesterday, you implied you could show us what makes you different." "I didn't imply that. You inferred it." Naruto stood, and the movement was so smooth that for a moment it looked like the chair had simply disappeared beneath him. But sure. Is there somewhere outside where I won't break anything expensive? They went to the clearing behind the house, near the river. The rain had softened to a mist, and the grey light filtering through the clouds was steady and flat. The 7 Cullens arranged themselves in a loose semicircle. Naruto stood facing them, about 20 yards away, relaxed, hands at his sides. "What would you like to see?" he asked. "Whatever you're comfortable showing," Carlyle said. Naruto considered for a moment. Then he moved. He didn't telegraph it. Didn't crouch, didn't tense, didn't shift his weight. One frame he was standing still, and the next he was gone, truly gone, not just fast, but absent from the space he occupied in a way that made every vampire present feel a spike of primal alarm. Even Edward, who could track movement that would be invisible to human eyes, lost him. For one full second, Naruto Uzumaki did not exist in the visual field of 7 vampires. Then he was behind them. All of them. Standing at the tree line, 30 yards past where he'd started, leaning against a cedar trunk with his arms crossed. "That's not possible," Jasper said quietly. His body had shifted into a combat-ready stance without his conscious decision, decades of warfare and vampire fighting baked into his reflexes. "It's not fast," Edward said, and his voice was strange. "I tracked every vampire I've ever seen. I can follow movement at speeds that would be a blur to our kind." He didn't just move fast. The space between where he was and where he is now, there was no transition. He just was here and then was there. "Close," Naruto said from the tree line. "It's not teleportation, though. It's speed. Just, a kind of speed your bodies can't produce. Mine can." He walked back toward them at a normal pace. "The energy I carry, the thing that merged with the venom, it amplifies everything. Speed, strength, senses, healing." "Healing?" Carlyle's eyes sharpened. "Vampires don't heal. We're frozen. Our bodies don't change." Naruto held up his right hand, and between one blink and the next, a thin cut appeared across his palm. He dragged a fingernail through his own skin so fast they hadn't seen it. Dark golden fluid welled from the cut, not quite blood, not quite venom, something in between that caught the gray light and seemed to hold it. They watched the cut close. Not instantly, but fast, a few seconds, the golden fluid absorbing back into his skin, new tissue knitting together seamlessly until his palm was smooth and unmarked. Carlyle stepped forward, his medical and scientific instincts overriding everything else. "May I?" Naruto extended his hand. Carlyle took it, turned it over, examined the unmarked palm. His fingers were gentle and precise, and Naruto could feel the barely contained excitement of a researcher confronted with something that violated every law he understood. "Your skin is warm," Carlyle murmured. "I run warm. The energy generates heat. Your eyes are blue. Always have been. The venom didn't change them. Couldn't, I think. There was already too much else going on in there." "Remarkable." Carlyle released his hand and stepped back. "Truly remarkable. In 3 centuries, I've never encountered." "Yeah, I get that." Naruto smiled. "I'm one of a kind. Not bragging, just, a fact. There was never another like me, and there won't be. The conditions that made me don't exist anymore." He felt Rosalie's gaze on him, sharp, probing, trying to find the lie or the angle. He turned to meet it. "Still think I'm a threat?" "I think you're the most dangerous thing I've ever seen," Rosalie said flatly. "Which, yes, makes you a threat. Danger and threat aren't the same thing. A thunderstorm is dangerous. It's not a threat unless you stand in a field holding a metal rod. And what if someone makes you a metal rod?" Naruto looked at her, really looked, past the beauty and the ice and the carefully maintained anger, and he saw what was underneath. Fear. Not of him specifically, but of anything that could disrupt the fragile, precious thing she'd built here with her family. Rosalie Hale was a woman who had been broken once and had spent decades reassembling herself into something unbreakable, and the prospect of a new variable, powerful, unknown, uncontrollable, threatened the stability she'd fought for. "Then I'll be somewhere else," he said quietly. "Rosalie, I don't want to hurt your family. I don't want to disrupt what you've built. If my being here causes problems, I'll leave. That's a promise, and I don't break those." She held his gaze for a long moment. Something flickered in her golden eyes, surprise, maybe, or the first hairline crack in an assessment she'd already made. "We'll see," she said, and turned away. They talked for hours. Carlyle was insatiable, questions about Naruto's origin, his physiology, his history, the world he'd come from. Naruto answered most of them honestly, editing only the details that would sound insane without context: giant-tailed beasts, shinobi warfare, a friend who could open portals to other dimensions. He told Carlyle about the venom, how he'd been bitten by a creature that was itself a hybrid, a thing born from the intersection of his world and this one, and how the transformation had merged with the chakra in his system to produce something new. Esme brought him tea. He didn't need it, but he drank it, and thanked her, and the small domestic gesture seemed to please her more than any demonstration of power. Emmett challenged him to arm wrestle. Naruto obliged and let Emmett push for about 10 seconds before pinning his hand to the table so hard the table cracked. Emmett's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Again," he said. They went 4 more rounds. Naruto won all of them. Emmett declared them best friends. Jasper kept his distance but watched everything with military precision. Naruto respected that. The soldier was assessing, cataloging, running threat models. That was smart. Naruto caught his eye once and gave a small nod. "I see you. I understand. Take your time," and Jasper returned it. Edward remained by the piano, alternating between watching Naruto with suspicion and watching Alice with something more complicated. Because Alice hadn't stopped staring. She'd positioned herself in the armchair closest to where Naruto sat, and over the course of the afternoon she'd migrated from attentive listening to a kind of rapt focus that went beyond interest. She asked her own questions, not about physiology or history, but about experience. What was the most beautiful thing he'd seen? A sunrise over the Himalayas in 1487, when the air was so clear the sky turned colors he'd never seen before or since. What did he miss most about being human? Sleeping. Not the rest, the dreams. Had he ever been in love? Yes. Twice. Both of them died a very long time ago. That last answer landed differently. Alice's eyes went soft, and something passed between them, a recognition, a shared understanding of what it meant to be a creature built for forever in a world full of things that ended. "Can you see my future?" Naruto asked her, when the conversation had drifted into a comfortable lull and the others had scattered to various parts of the house. "Barely." She tucked her legs underneath her, that dancer's flexibility making the position look effortless. "You're like looking at the sun reflected in water. I get impressions, feelings, flashes of gold. Nothing concrete. Does that bother you?" "It should." She tilted her head, that small, wondering smile returning. "I've built my entire existence around seeing what's coming. Knowing. Preparing. You're the first thing in decades that I can't map, can't predict, can't plan for. And it's the most alive I've felt since I woke up in that asylum with no memory and a head full of someone else's futures." The honesty of it hit Naruto like a physical thing. Not because it was romantic, though there was a charge in the air between them that even a human could have felt, but because it was brave. This small, bright, ancient young woman was looking at the most dangerous unknown she'd ever encountered and choosing curiosity over fear. He recognized that courage. He'd carried a version of it himself, once, in a boy who'd been hated and feared and chose to smile anyway. "Alice," he said, and her name felt like something in his mouth, a word that wanted to be said again. "I don't know what I'm doing here. I was supposed to walk to the coast and keep going. I've been walking for a long time. But this place, your family," he paused. "You asked what makes this town interesting. It's not the vampires or the wolves or the weird supernatural concentration. It's that I walked into a diner yesterday and a girl asked me where I was from, and her dad offered me a motel recommendation, and today a doctor made me tea and a guy arm wrestled me and a woman told me I was the most dangerous thing she'd ever seen, and all of it was honest. Do you know how rare that is? In 800 years." Alice was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and touched his hand, just her fingertips against his knuckles, light as a question. Her skin was cool. His was warm. The contact point between them felt like the first note of a song. "Stay," she said. "For a while. Please." From the second floor, Naruto heard Edward shift. From the kitchen, he heard Esme pause in a task she didn't need to do. From the porch, where Rosalie had retreated to stare at the forest and pretend she wasn't listening, he heard a sharp intake of breath. From the southeast, 40 miles away but closing, he felt that feral, angry vampire circling tighter. And from somewhere very far away, Italy, maybe, or further, he felt the faintest tremor of attention, like a vast eye turning slowly in his direction. Naruto looked at Alice's fingers on his hand, and at her golden eyes, and at the rain falling past the windows of this glass house full of impossible people, and he made the kind of decision that changes everything. "Okay," he said. "For a while." Chapter 2, Gold and Ice. Naruto had been in Forks for 4 days when Alice took him hunting. Not because he needed to feed, he'd explained this to her twice already, that the golden energy in his chest metabolized differently, that he could go months between feedings and even then preferred to draw life force from the natural world rather than from blood. But Alice wanted to show him how she moved through the forest, and Naruto understood that this was her language. Some people opened up through conversation. Some through touch. Alice Cullen opened up through motion. They ran north from the Cullen house at 3 in the morning, when the rain had paused and the forest was suspended in that held-breath silence between storms. Alice moved like water, fluid, effortless, her small body threading through the trees with a precision that turned running into choreography. She leapt a fallen log, caught a branch 20 feet up, swung herself through a gap in the canopy, and landed on a mossy boulder without disturbing a single fern. Naruto kept pace beside her, and the fact that he matched her speed without strain, that his feet barely touched the ground, that he moved through the dense old growth like the trees were stepping aside for him, made her push harder. Faster. She wanted to see where his ceiling was. She didn't find it. After 10 miles, she stopped on a ridge overlooking a deep valley. A river wound through the bottom, silver in the pre-dawn gray. The forest below was thick with elk, she could smell them, a warm musk that made her throat tighten with reflexive thirst. Naruto stopped beside her. He wasn't breathing hard. He wasn't breathing at all, actually, though she'd noticed he chose to breathe most of the time, another one of his human affectations that she found unexpectedly endearing. "You're not even trying," she said. "I'm trying to keep the pace conversational. Go faster. Alice, I want to see. Please." He looked at her, and she saw something shift behind those impossible blue eyes, a decision made, a restraint loosened. Then he was gone. Not the disappearing act he'd pulled for the family. This time she was watching for it, tracking him with every ounce of her vampiric perception, and she saw him go, for exactly 1/10 of a second. A streak of gold light that tore through the forest below them, crossed the valley floor, hit the opposite ridge, doubled back, circled the valley twice, and stopped beside her on the outcropping. The trees in his wake swayed as displaced air caught up. A flock of birds erupted from the canopy a full 3 seconds after he'd passed them, their tiny brains still processing what had happened. He'd covered maybe 15 miles in under 2 seconds. "Oh," Alice said softly. Naruto's hair was slightly windswept. A single leaf clung to his jacket. He plucked it off and let it fall. "I don't show off," he said. "But you asked." "I did. She sat down on the ridge, her legs dangling over the edge, and patted the rock beside her. "Sit with me." He sat. Below them, the elk herd moved slowly through the valley, unaware of the predators above. "Can I ask you something personal?" Alice said. "You've been asking me personal things for 4 days. More personal. Go ahead. The 2 people you loved. The ones who died. What were they like?" Naruto was quiet for a while. Not the avoidant silence of someone who didn't want to answer, but the careful silence of someone choosing which memories to unwrap. "The first was a girl I grew up with," he said. "Sakura. She was brilliant and terrifying, and she could punch a hole through a mountain. I loved her from the time I was 12 until, well, honestly, I never stopped. But she loved someone else, and that was okay. It was a different time. Love wasn't something you negotiated. You just carried it and hoped it didn't crush you. Did it? Almost. A few times." He picked up a pebble and turned it over in his fingers. "She died at 83. I held her hand. She told me I still looked like a stupid kid, and I told her she was still the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, and she laughed, and then she was gone." Alice didn't say anything. She leaned slightly toward him, her shoulder almost touching his, offering proximity instead of words. "The second was, centuries later. A human woman in Kyoto, in the 1600s. Aiko. She was a painter. She knew what I was and didn't care. We had 11 years together, which felt like 11 minutes. She died in a fire that I should have been there to prevent." His voice didn't break, but something in the quality of it changed, a depth that hadn't been there before, like a lake revealing that it was much further down than it looked. "After her, I stopped. Not because I was afraid of loss, but because I was starting to realize that love, for someone like me, is a form of cruelty. Not to me. To them. I stay the same, and they don't. They don't." Alice processed this. Then she said, very carefully, "I won't age either." The sentence landed between them like a lit match near dry timber. Naruto turned to look at her, and she met his gaze without blinking, without retreating, with the kind of directness that he was beginning to understand was simply her. Alice didn't hint at things, didn't dance around them, didn't let subtext do the heavy lifting. "Alice. I'm not proposing. I'm stating a fact. I'm immortal. You're immortal. Whatever this is, between us, it doesn't have the expiration date you're used to." She pulled her knees up and wrapped her arms around them. "I know it's been 4 days. I know that's nothing against 800 years. But I've seen enough of the future to know that time doesn't correlate with significance. Some things take centuries to mean nothing. Some things take 4 days to mean everything. You said you can barely see my future. I can see mine. And you're in it. Not clearly, not in the way I usually see, with specifics and timelines and decision trees. You're there like warmth. Like a direction. Every path I look down that includes you in it is brighter than the ones that don't." She paused. "That could mean anything. I'm not naive enough to think brighter always means better. But I'm choosing to walk toward the light and see what's there." Naruto sat with that for a long moment. The elk below shifted, a bull lifting its head to test the wind, sensing something it couldn't name. "I should tell you," he said, "that I don't know how to do this halfway. It's not in my wiring. When I care about someone, I care completely. It's been my greatest strength and my worst flaw for my entire existence. I don't have a casual setting." Alice smiled. That electric, lit from inside smile that he'd first seen in the Cullen living room. "Good. Neither do I." She reached out and took his hand, not fingertips this time, but fully, her cool fingers lacing through his warm ones. The temperature difference between them should have been uncomfortable. It wasn't. It was like holding a question and an answer at the same time. They sat on the ridge and watched the dawn try to break through the clouds, and for the first time in a very long time, Naruto didn't feel the pull to keep walking. The Cullens had, with varying degrees of enthusiasm, agreed that Naruto should enroll at Forks High School. Carlyle's reasoning was practical. A stranger hanging around a small town without a visible purpose would attract exactly the kind of attention they'd spent decades avoiding. If Naruto was staying, temporarily, everyone was careful to say, he needed a cover story. Transfer student from out of state was the simplest option. Carlyle had the documentation ready in 12 hours, because apparently forging identities was a core competency of long-lived vampires. Naruto found the whole thing deeply amusing. "I'm 800 years old, and you want me to take AP Biology," he said, leaning against the kitchen counter while Carlyle finalized the paperwork. "You'll find it surprisingly interesting," Carlyle said without looking up. "The advances in genetic science alone, I've read the literature, Carlyle. I had a subscription to Nature for 40 years. Then you'll enjoy correcting the teacher." So on Monday morning, Naruto walked through the front doors of Forks High School wearing a gray flannel shirt and dark jeans and carrying a backpack that contained a single notebook, a pen, and an 800-year-old's bemusement at the circularity of existence. He'd fought wars, crossed oceans, watched empires rise and crumble, and here he was, getting a locker assignment from a secretary named Mrs. Cope who kept glancing at his face and losing her place on the form. "You'll be in, oh, let me see, third period English with Mr. Birdie," and then, she blinked, adjusted her glasses, and started the sentence over. "I'm sorry, where did you say you transferred from?" "Alaska," Naruto said, because that was what the paperwork said. "Alaska. How nice. You'll find it's a bit warmer here. I'm looking forward to it." His first class was history, which he found almost unbearably ironic. The teacher, a tired man named Mr. Varner who had the energy of someone counting down to retirement, was covering the Renaissance, and Naruto sat in the back row and listened to a version of events that was about 40% accurate. He'd been in Florence in 1497. He'd watched Savonarola's bonfire of the vanities from a rooftop. The actual event had been louder and sadder and more confused than any textbook captured. He was polite. He took notes. He did not correct the teacher, because Carlyle had specifically asked him not to cause scenes, and Naruto respected the man enough to try. The whispers started before first period ended. "New kid. Transfer. Gorgeous. Weird eyes. Sitting with the Cullens at lunch. Not sitting with the Cullens at lunch. Someone said he was Carlyle's nephew. Someone else said he was a foreign exchange student. A girl in his English class asked if he was a model and then turned so red she looked like she might combust." Naruto navigated it all with the ease of someone who'd been the new kid in more places than existed on any modern map. He smiled. He was friendly. He deflected personal questions with charm and misdirection. He was, by lunchtime, the most talked about person in the school's recent history, which was saying something given that the Cullens had been there for 2 years. He found Bella in the cafeteria. She was sitting at a table near the windows with a group of humans, a chatty girl with glasses, a tall blonde boy who kept glancing at Bella when she wasn't looking, and a few others. Edward was nowhere in sight, which Naruto found interesting. The Cullens typically ate together at their own table, a practice that everyone at the school treated as both normal and slightly unnatural. Naruto bought a sandwich he didn't intend to eat, walked over, and sat down across from Bella. "Hey. Hey." She looked surprised, then pleased, then slightly uncertain, the rapid emotional shuffle of someone whose social life had become very complicated. You enrolled." Carlyle's idea. Apparently loitering in the forest isn't a sustainable cover story. "You were loitering in the forest. For 4 days." He unwrapped the sandwich and took a bite. "Perfectly mediocre. This is terrible." Bella laughed, a real laugh, startled and unguarded, and Naruto noticed the girl with glasses and the blonde boy both staring at him. "I'm Naruto," he said to the table at large. "Jessica, said the girl with glasses, slightly too quickly. Stanley. Jessica Stanley. Are you related to the Cullens? No. Family friend. From Alaska? From Alaska. What part of Alaska? The cold part. Jessica opened her mouth, closed it, and then smiled in a way that suggested she was adding him to a mental spreadsheet of attractive, evasive males associated with the Cullen family. The blond boy, Mike, someone said, shook his hand with the performative grip of a teenager establishing dominance. Naruto matched his pressure exactly, the same mirror trick he'd used on Edward, and Mike seemed satisfied. The rest of the table accepted him with the easy absorption of high schoolers confronted with someone confident and friendly. Within 10 minutes, he was part of the conversation, a debate about whether the school's football team had any chance at the playoffs, they didn't, and whether Mr. Varner had ever actually been young, doubtful. Bella watched him integrate with an expression he couldn't quite read. Part admiration, part wariness, part something else. When the conversation drifted and the others were arguing about a movie, she leaned across the table and said quietly, "You know this can't last, right? The fitting in thing. The Cullens have been here 2 years and people are already starting to notice they don't age. I know. I'm not staying long enough for it to matter." "Are you sure about that?" He met her eyes. That mental shield of hers hummed in his awareness, steady, strong, unconscious. He wondered what she'd be capable of if she ever learned to wield it intentionally. "What makes you ask?" "Alice hasn't stopped talking about you. Rosalie hasn't stopped not talking about you, which, with Rosalie, is basically the same thing. Edward is," she paused, choosing words carefully. "Edward is unsettled. He doesn't like unknowns. And you?" Bella picked at the edge of her own sandwich. "I think you're the first person who's sat at this table and just talked to everyone. Like a normal person. The Cullens can't do that. They try, but there's always this distance. You don't have that distance. 800 years of practice. At being normal. At being a person. They're not the same thing." He leaned back. "Bella, can I be straight with you? I'd prefer it. Your boyfriend has a mind-reading ability, and I know he uses it constantly. He monitors the people around you. He probably monitors your emotional state through other people's perceptions of you. That's not a criticism, it's his nature, and he does it because he cares. But it means you live in a fishbowl. Everyone's thoughts about you get filtered through him and back to you. It must be exhausting." Bella went very still. Not the stillness of offense, the stillness of someone hearing something they'd felt but never articulated. "I'm not trying to drive a wedge," Naruto continued. "I like Edward. He's intense, but he's genuine. I'm saying that if the reason you find me easy to talk to is that I'm the first person in your life who can't be monitored by your boyfriend's ability, that's worth thinking about. Not because there's something wrong with Edward. Because there might be something right about having a space that's just yours." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she said, "How did you know about his ability?" "I'm 800 years old and I've met hundreds of vampires. I can usually figure out someone's gift within a few hours. Edward projects when he reads, there's a subtle psychic pressure, like someone leaning on a door. Most people can't feel it. Your shield can, though. You feel it, don't you? A slight heaviness when he's around, like the air is thicker." Bella's lips parted. I thought that was just him. His presence. It is his presence. It's also his ability, pushing against your shield and bouncing off. You've been interpreting it as attraction, which it partly is. But your mind has been deflecting a low-level psychic intrusion for over a year, and some part of you knows it. You make it sound sinister. It's not. It's just real. I'm not going to sugarcoat things for you, Bella. You're involved with a world that's far more dangerous and complicated than anyone's told you, and you're handling it with a composure that honestly impresses me. You deserve to understand what's actually happening around you. The bell rang. Students began shuffling toward the exits, the cafeteria's noise level shifting from idle chatter to movement. Bella didn't get up immediately. "Will you be at the Cullens tonight?" she asked. "Probably. I'll be there too." She stood, grabbed her tray. "Don't let Edward intimidate you." Naruto grinned. "I really don't think that's going to be a problem." The afternoon was a slow crawl of classes he didn't need. Biology, Carlyle had been right, it was genuinely interesting, though the teacher's understanding of cellular mechanics was about 20 years behind the current research. Gym, where he participated in a basketball game with precisely calibrated mediocrity, scoring enough to avoid suspicion and missing enough to avoid attention. Spanish, where the teacher asked him to introduce himself in Spanish and he responded in flawless Castilian, which was technically correct but earned him a look that suggested he'd overshot. He felt Alice watching him all day. Not literally, they shared no classes, but her visions were firing, he could tell. Little pulses of that precognitive energy, directed at him, trying to resolve his near future into something she could read. He sent a pulse of warmth back each time, a deliberate flare of golden energy that he knew she'd feel as a brightening in her visions. It was the closest thing he had to passing notes. After the final bell, he walked out to the parking lot and found Rosalie leaning against her red BMW, alone. She was waiting for him. He knew this because Emmett was nowhere in sight, because Edward's Volvo was already gone, and because Rosalie Hale did not lean against things accidentally. Every element of her posture was a choice, the crossed arms, the tilted chin, the sheet of golden hair falling over one shoulder like a dare. "Walk with me," she said. It wasn't a question. Naruto adjusted his backpack strap and fell into step beside her. She didn't head toward the car. Instead, she walked behind the school, past the athletic fields, toward the tree line where a narrow trail disappeared into the forest. The rain had resumed, light, steady, the kind that soaked you slowly. They walked in silence for maybe 5 minutes. The trail wound through young-growth forest, second-growth Doug firs planted in rows, before opening into an older section where the trees thickened and the canopy blocked most of the rain. Rosalie stopped in a small clearing and turned to face him. "I don't trust you," she said. "I know. Everyone else is falling over themselves. Carlyle thinks you're a scientific miracle. Esme wants to adopt you. Emmett wants a sparring partner. Alice," her jaw tightened. "Alice is in deep and she doesn't even realize it. And you? I think you're a disruption. I think you walked into our lives at a moment when things were already fragile, Bella, the situation with the wolves, the constant threat of exposure, and you've made everything more complicated." Naruto listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't defend himself, didn't redirect. He just stood in the rain and let her talk. "I've spent decades building this life," Rosalie continued, and now the ice in her voice was starting to crack, showing the heat underneath. "Do you understand that? Decades of pretending, of restraining myself, of playing a role. High school, over and over. Small towns, over and over. Because Carlyle believes we can be more than what we are, and because this family is the only thing I have that's mine. And now you walk in, this thing that none of us can understand, and everyone just opens up to you like you've been here forever. Like you belong. And that scares you. Don't tell me what I feel. I'm not telling you. I'm asking." She stared at him. The rain beaded on her perfect skin, each droplet catching the gray light like a tiny jewel. In that moment, she looked less like a vampire and more like a statue, something carved from marble and grief and placed in a garden to be admired but never touched. "Yes," she said quietly. "It scares me. Because the last time something new entered my life, it destroyed the one I had." Naruto didn't ask what she meant. He could see it, in the set of her shoulders, in the way her hands curled at her sides, in the particular quality of her anger, which wasn't the hot, explosive kind but the cold, structural kind, the kind that held weight, that had been load-bearing for so long it had become part of the architecture. I was human once, she said, and each word cost her something. I was beautiful and I was vain and I was happy, and a man I trusted took all of that from me in one night. I didn't choose this life. I didn't choose to be frozen at 18 with a body that can't age and can't die and can't. She stopped. Drew a breath she didn't need. I can't have children. I can't grow old with someone. I can't sit on a porch at 70 and watch grandchildren play in a yard. All of that was stolen from me, and every single day of this endless existence, I feel the shape of what's missing. Naruto stood in the rain across from her and felt the weight of her truth settle into the clearing like something physical. This was what she carried. Under the beauty, under the fury, under the ice, this was the wound. I lost my world, he said. Not to compare, not to diminish hers. To meet her where she was. Everything I knew, every person, every place, every way of living, it's gone. Not because someone took it from me, but because time did. I watched it end, slowly, over 100 years. Friend by friend. Grave by grave. Until I was the only one who remembered any of it, and then I crossed an ocean and found a world that had never heard of us. Rosalie was watching him with an expression he hadn't seen from her before. The hostility was still there, but underneath it, something was listening. I'm not going to pretend I understand what was done to you, Naruto said. I can't. What you went through, what was taken from you, is yours. Nobody gets to minimize it or reframe it or tell you to let it go. But I know what it's like to carry something that heavy for that long, and I know that the weight doesn't have to mean you're broken. It can mean you're strong. And Rosalie, you are staggeringly, terrifyingly strong. I could feel it from the moment I met you. Don't. Her voice was thick. Don't do the thing where you're kind to me and I have to be grateful. I'm not being kind. I'm being accurate. And you don't have to be grateful for accuracy. You can be pissed about it if you want. A sound escaped her, something between a laugh and a sob, strangled before it fully formed. She pressed her hand to her mouth, and for a moment the mask cracked completely and Naruto saw the person underneath, not Rosalie Hale the beautiful vampire, not the Ice Queen, not the protective sister. Just a woman who had been hurt and was tired of being hurt and was even more tired of being afraid of being hurt again. I don't cry, she said from behind her hand. We can't cry. Did you know that? Another thing the venom took. We can feel everything, grief, rage, love, loss, and we can't even cry. I can, Naruto said quietly. She looked at him. The energy I carry, it doesn't just heal and strengthen. It feels. It kept the parts of me that the venom tried to take. I can sleep if I choose to. I can eat. I can bleed. He paused. I can cry. That's not fair. But she said it without malice. Almost with wonder. No. It's not. They stood in the clearing for a while, the rain falling gently around them. The silence between them was different now, not hostile, not comfortable exactly, but honest. A clearing of its own. I still don't trust you, Rosalie said eventually. That's okay. I'm going to keep watching you. I'd expect nothing less. And if you hurt my family, any of them, I will find a way to end you, 800 years and glowing skin and impossible speed and all. Naruto looked at her, and the warmth in his chest pulsed, not with power, but with recognition. With respect. With the beginning of something he wasn't going to name yet, because she wasn't ready to hear it and he wasn't sure he was ready to feel it. Rosalie, he said, if I ever hurt your family, I'll hold still and let you. She searched his face for the lie. She didn't find it. Come on, she said, turning back toward the trail. Alice is going to have a vision of us talking and lose her mind with curiosity. Is that a problem? It's entertainment. I get so few pleasures. She walked ahead of him through the rain, and Naruto followed, and he thought about how strange it was that the person in this coven who trusted him least was the one who just shown him the most. That evening, the Cullen house was fuller than usual. Bella had driven over after dinner with Charlie, and she sat in the living room with Edward's arm around her, though Naruto noticed, because he noticed everything, that she'd chosen the end of the couch rather than the middle, leaving herself room to turn and engage with the rest of the room. A small thing. Maybe meaningless. Maybe not. Carlyle had requested a family conversation, his diplomatic term for a meeting, to discuss Naruto's continued presence in Forks. The subtext was clear: they needed to decide, collectively, whether he was staying and what that meant. Naruto sat in the armchair that was rapidly becoming his, and the 7 Cullens plus Bella arranged themselves around the room. Alice was on the window seat, her legs tucked under her, vibrating with that barely contained energy. Rosalie stood by the bookshelf, arms crossed, but her posture was different than it had been 4 days ago, less walled off, more watchful. Jasper had positioned himself where he could see everyone, a strategist's instinct. "I'll make this simple," Carlyle said. "Naruto, you've been in Forks for nearly a week. You've met the family, you've enrolled in school, and you've been, by all accounts, a positive presence. But I need to ask directly, what are your intentions? Are you passing through, or are you considering staying?" Naruto looked around the room. At Emmett, who gave him a thumbs up. At Esme, who nodded encouragingly. At Jasper, who was unreadable. At Edward, who was watching Bella's face. At Rosalie, who met his eyes and did not look away. At Alice, who was smiling. At Bella, who looked curious. "I've been a nomad for over 700 years, Naruto said. I've passed through hundreds of places. Towns, cities, countries. I've stayed in some of them for months, even years. But I've never settled. Never joined a coven. Never," he gestured vaguely at the room. "This. The family thing. But," Alice said. "But this is the first time I've wanted to." He let the words breathe. "I won't pretend that's not complicated. I'm a variable you didn't plan for. My presence changes the dynamics here, with the school, with the town, potentially with the wolves, definitely with," he paused, feeling the weight of what he was about to say. "There are things you should know. Things I've been sitting on because I wanted to assess them first." Carlyle leaned forward. "What things?" "There's a vampire circling your territory. Has been since before I arrived. Red-eyed, female, operating solo. She's been running a pattern, wide arcs to the southeast, staying outside the wolves' range in your patrol routes. She's tracking something. Or someone." The room's temperature dropped. Not literally, but the emotional shift was immediate and sharp. Edward's arm tightened around Bella. Jasper's hand moved to Alice's shoulder. Rosalie straightened. "Victoria," Edward said, and the name came out like a blade. "You know her. She's the mate of a tracker we killed last year. He tried to hunt Bella. We destroyed him. Victoria ran. And now she's back." Naruto nodded. "I've been monitoring her since my first night here. She's patient, she's smart, and she's fixated. Her orbit's been tightening. A week ago she was 40 miles out. Last night she was 25. Why didn't you say something sooner?" Rosalie demanded. "Because I wanted to understand what I was dealing with before I caused a panic. Now I understand. She's a survivor, her gift is self-preservation, an instinct for escape. She's not going to charge in head first. She's going to find the angle, the gap, the moment when your guard is lowest." "She's after Bella," Edward said. "Almost certainly. Mate for a mate, it's a classic revenge pattern." Bella had gone pale, but her voice was steady. "What do we do?" "That's up to your family," Naruto said. "But if you're asking what I'd do, I'd end it. Tonight. She's 25 miles out and I know exactly where she is. You can track her from here? Jasper asked, and there was professional interest in the question, one predator recognizing another's capabilities. I can feel every vampire within 100 miles. It's not tracking, exactly. It's awareness. The energy I carry is sensitive to other supernatural signatures. He paused. I could be there and back before anyone finished their homework. No. Carlyle stood, and his voice carried the quiet authority of a man who'd led a coven for centuries. We don't send anyone, even you, to confront a threat alone and without discussion. This is a family matter, and we'll address it as a family. Carlyle, with respect, I could handle Victoria in my sleep. I don't doubt that. But this isn't about capability. It's about principle. If you're going to be part of this group, even temporarily, then you operate within it. Not above it. Naruto held Carlyle's gaze. For a moment, something ancient flickered behind his blue eyes, the part of him that had been a commander, a leader, someone accustomed to making decisions and executing them without committee. That part wanted to be in the forest right now, running Victoria down, eliminating the threat before it could touch anyone he was beginning to care about. But Carlyle was right. Naruto knew it. The old man's principles weren't weakness, they were the glue holding this family together. Respect them or leave. Okay, he said. Your house, your rules. How do you want to handle it? What followed was a tactical discussion that Naruto found genuinely impressive. Jasper took the lead, and the soldier in him came alive in a way that transformed him from the quiet, watchful figure in the corner to a sharp, commanding presence that reminded Naruto forcefully of Shikamaru. She won't come at us directly, Jasper said, sketching a rough map of the area on a notepad. Edward's right, she's a survivor. She'll create a distraction, try to isolate Bella, strike when we're spread thin. The wolves complicate things. They patrol the reservation and the border, but their coverage doesn't extend to town or the school. Can you coordinate with them? Naruto asked. The treaty limits our interaction, Carlyle said carefully. We have an agreement, we don't cross onto their land, they don't expose us. Communication has been strained. Because of Bella, Rosalie said bluntly. The wolves don't like that she's involved with Edward. They see her as a human in danger, and they're not wrong. I can take care of myself, Bella said, and every vampire in the room carefully did not exchange glances. The immediate concern is containment, Jasper continued. We need to tighten our patrol range and push her out, or draw her in. If Naruto can track her position in real time, that changes our tactical picture significantly. We've been running blind sweeps. With his sensing ability, we can run targeted intercepts. I can do more than track, Naruto said. He held up his hand, and a small sphere of golden light materialized above his palm, warm, pulsing gently, casting amber shadows across the walls. Every eye in the room locked onto it. I can create markers. Sensory nodes. I leave them in the forest and they extend my awareness. With a dozen of these spread across your territory, nothing gets in or out without me knowing. The golden sphere floated up from his hand, drifted to the nearest window, and passed through the glass without disturbing it. It hovered outside for a moment, then shot into the forest like a firefly and disappeared. That's incredible, Carlyle breathed. That's terrifying, Rosalie said. Both can be true, Naruto said. They planned for another hour. Jasper and Naruto fell into an easy operational rhythm that surprised both of them, two military minds speaking the same language across centuries. Alice contributed vision-based intelligence, offering probabilistic assessments of Victoria's likely moves. Edward monitored the mental landscape. Emmett volunteered for every patrol shift. Rosalie was quiet but attentive, and when she did speak, her observations were sharp and practical. Bella sat through all of it and didn't flinch. By the end, they had a plan. Naruto would seed the territory with sensory nodes overnight, establishing a perimeter. Jasper would restructure the patrol schedule around real-time intelligence. Alice would focus her visions on Victoria specifically. And Bella would not be left alone, ever, until the threat was neutralized. "I don't need a babysitter," Bella said. "You need someone who can move faster than a vampire with a survival instinct," Naruto said. "That narrows the field. To you. Or Edward. He's not as fast as me, but he's fast enough, and he's motivated." Edward, who had been tense and silent for most of the discussion, looked at Naruto with an expression that was difficult to parse. Gratitude, maybe. Resentment, definitely. Respect, reluctantly. "I'll protect her," Edward said. "I know you will." Naruto met his eyes. "But Edward, if it comes down to it, if Victoria gets close and you have to choose between chasing her and staying with Bella, you stay. I'll handle the rest. You don't give me orders. I'm giving you advice. From someone who's lost people because he chased the fight instead of guarding the door." Something old and painful moved across Naruto's face. "Stay with her. Trust me to handle what's in the dark." Edward stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded, once, and pulled Bella closer. The meeting broke up. Emmett clapped Naruto on the shoulder hard enough to stagger a normal vampire and said, "This is the most fun I've had in years." Carlyle retreated to his study with a look of intense concentration. Jasper and Alice had a quiet conversation near the stairs that Naruto deliberately didn't listen to, because some things weren't his business. Bella caught him on the porch as he was heading out to seed the forest with sensor nodes. "Hey!" He turned. She was standing in the doorway, backlit by the warm light of the Cullen living room, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. "Thank you," she said. "For telling them about Victoria. For all of it. Don't thank me yet. I haven't done anything. You stayed. That's something." She hesitated, then said, "The thing you said at lunch. About Edward's ability, and my shield, and having a space that's mine. Yeah. No one's ever explained that to me before. Not Edward, not Carlyle, not Alice. They all know about my shield, and none of them ever told me what it actually does. What it means." Her jaw set in a way that was more fierce than angry. "I've been walking around with a psychic defense system for over a year and everyone treated it like a curiosity. You treated it like it mattered. It does matter. I know. That's my point." She looked at him with those serious brown eyes. "I don't know what you are, Naruto. I don't know why you're really here, or what's going to happen. But I know that you talk to me like I'm a person who deserves complete information, and that's rare. In my life, that's rare." She went back inside. The door closed. Through the glass, Naruto saw Edward meet her at the couch, saw him reach for her hand, saw her take it but turn her body slightly away, toward the window, toward the dark forest, toward whatever she was thinking about. Naruto stepped off the porch and into the rain. The forest swallowed him in 3 strides. He ran, not at full speed, but fast, weaving through the trees, and every 50 yards he paused to create a sensor node. Each one was a small concentration of golden chakra, compressed to the size of a marble, embedded in a tree trunk or buried in the soil. As he placed each one, his awareness expanded, a growing web of perception that spread through the forest like a nervous system coming alive. By midnight, he had 47 nodes spread across 30 square miles. The network hummed in his consciousness, a living map of the territory. He could feel the Cullens in their house, 7 cool signatures and 1 warm human one. He could feel the wolves on the reservation, 4 of them patrolling in shifted form, their hot signatures blazing like torches. He could feel the small creatures of the forest, deer, elk, rabbits, owls. And he could feel Victoria. 22 miles to the southeast, moving fast along a ridgeline, her signature sharp and anxious and hungry. She paused. Changed direction. Started circling again. She'd felt his nodes. Not directly, she couldn't sense chakra, but her survival instinct was firing, telling her something in the forest had changed, that the territory was no longer unmonitored. Good. Let her feel watched. Let her panic. Naruto settled onto a high branch and leaned back against the trunk, letting the rain fall on his face. The sensor network pulsed around him, steady and warm, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, the forest didn't feel like a place he was passing through. It felt like a place he was protecting. He closed his eyes and thought about Alice's hand in his. About Rosalie's voice cracking in the clearing. About Bella's fierce, quiet insistence on being treated as complete. 3 women, 3 entirely different forms of gravity, all pulling him in directions he hadn't planned to go. Kurama, he murmured to the fox who was no longer there but whose warmth still lived in his chest, I think I might be in trouble. The warmth pulsed, and if he let himself imagine, it felt almost like laughter. Chapter 3, 3 kinds of gravity. The first week became 2. 2 became 3. The rain didn't stop, because rain in Forks never really stopped, it just occasionally paused to catch its breath before resuming with renewed commitment. Naruto settled into a rhythm that felt deceptively domestic for someone who'd spent 7 centuries refusing to sit still. Mornings, school, which remained absurd but increasingly enjoyable. He discovered that high school was significantly more entertaining when you had zero investment in your GPA and total investment in the people around you. He sat through classes with patient amusement, helped a sophomore with her calculus homework, math hadn't changed much since the 1400s, at its core, and joined the school's unofficial lunchtime basketball game, where he played just well enough to be picked first and just poorly enough to avoid questions. Afternoons, the Cullen house, where Carlyle had essentially turned him into a research subject with his enthusiastic consent. Blood samples, golden-tinged, baffling under a microscope, reflex tests, off any measurable scale, and long conversations about the nature of vampiric venom and how it had interacted with chakra. Naruto liked Carlyle. The man's curiosity was pure, not acquisitive, not seeking advantage, just the deep and joyful hunger of someone who believed understanding was its own reward. Evenings, patrol. The sensor network hummed through the forest like a second heartbeat. Victoria was still circling, but wider now, more cautious. She'd tested the perimeter twice in the last week, quick, probing runs that skimmed the edge of his sensor range before retreating. She was learning the shape of the net, looking for gaps. She wasn't finding any. And woven through all of it, like threads of different colors through the same fabric, were Alice and Rosalie and Bella. Alice had a habit of appearing beside him without warning. Not supernaturally, though she could certainly do that. She simply had an instinct for where he'd be and when he'd be there, a combination of her fractured visions and an intuition that bordered on uncanny. He'd be sitting on the school roof during a free period, watching the clouds, and she'd be climbing up the fire escape ladder with 2 coffees, one of which she had no intention of drinking. You don't need to bring me coffee, he said on a Tuesday morning, taking the cup anyway because it was warm and she'd remembered he liked it black. I know. I like the ritual. She settled beside him, dangling her legs over the edge of the roof. 3 stories below, students milled between buildings, hunched against the drizzle. Rituals are how immortals pretend time still has texture. That's either very wise or very sad. Both. Like most true things. She sipped from her own cup, she'd gotten herself a hot chocolate, which she held purely for the warmth and the smell. I saw something last night. About Victoria. He turned. Alice's visions had been sharpening over the last 3 weeks, not of him, which remained a golden blur, but of the things and people around him. Victoria's decisions, in particular, were becoming clearer. Alice theorized it was because Naruto's sensor network was constraining Victoria's options, making her future less variable and therefore easier to read. She's going to try something new, Alice said. I couldn't see the details, it was more of a feeling than a scene. But she's going to stop circling. She's made a decision. The quality of her future changed last night, it went from scattered and reactive to focused. Like someone who's been pacing finally picked a direction. How long? Days, not weeks. Naruto absorbed this. His sensor network had noted the same shift. Victoria's movements last night had been different, more purposeful, less like orbiting and more like reconnaissance of a specific route. "I'll tighten the perimeter tonight," he said. "And I'll talk to Jasper about adjusting the patrol schedule. Jasper's already on it. He felt the shift through me. He says my emotional state changes when a vision crystallizes, and he woke up at 3 a.m. and started drawing tactical diagrams on the bedroom wall." She paused. "Our bedroom wall. Which I'd just repainted." Naruto laughed. "Dedicated man. The best." Alice's voice softened, and Naruto heard something in it that he'd been listening for, a warmth that was genuine and uncomplicated, distinct from the electric current that ran between her and Naruto. She loved Jasper. That was real, and present, and unchanged. "Alice," he said carefully, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "I'm always honest with you." "I know. That's why I'm asking." He set his coffee down. "What's happening between us? The connection, the pull, whatever you want to call it, where does Jasper fit?" She didn't flinch. Didn't look away. Alice Cullen was many things, impulsive, intense, occasionally terrifying in her certainty, but she was never evasive. "Jasper and I have talked about it," she said. "Extensively. He feels what I feel, remember. He's known since the first day you were here that something in my emotional landscape shifted. He couldn't miss it even if he wanted to. And Jasper is a 200-year-old empath who has felt every shade of love and desire and attachment that exists in the human and vampire emotional spectrum. He knows that what I feel for you doesn't diminish what I feel for him. It's not a replacement. It's not a competition. She searched for the word. An addition. A new room in a house that already had plenty of rooms. That's very evolved. We've had a lot of time to evolve." She turned to face him fully, tucking one leg underneath her. "Naruto, I'm not going to pretend this isn't complicated. It is. Vampire relationships aren't like human ones, we bond deeply, permanently, and the idea of shared affection is foreign to most of our kind. But Jasper and I have never been most of our kind. I found him because I saw him before I met him, and he followed a stranger's vision across a country because he felt it was right. We don't do conventional. Does he want to talk to me about it? He said, and I quote, 'When the time is right, I'll know, because I'll feel it.' Which is Jasper for, yes, but I'm processing." "Fair enough." She reached over and took his hand. Cool fingers, warm palm. That temperature difference that had become familiar, almost necessary, like the contrast was the point. "I'm not in a rush," she said. "I've got nothing but time. So do you. Let this be what it is without trying to define it. You're very wise for someone who looks 19. I'm very wise for someone who's 112, which is what I actually am, and I'll thank you not to age shame me." He grinned. She grinned back. And on the roof of Forks High School, in the rain, something between them settled into a shape that didn't need a name yet but definitely had a heartbeat. Rosalie's thaw was slower, harder, and infinitely more rewarding. She didn't seek him out the way Alice did. Instead, she created opportunities for proximity that she could plausibly deny, being in the garage when he walked past, choosing the chair nearest his at family gatherings, volunteering for the same patrol shifts. Naruto recognized the pattern because he'd seen it before, in people who wanted connection but had been punished so many times for vulnerability that they'd learned to approach it sideways, like a wild animal circling food it didn't trust. He let her set the pace. The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening, 2.5 weeks into his stay. Naruto was in the Cullen's garage, a cavernous space that housed more automotive engineering than some dealerships, examining Rosalie's M3. He didn't know much about modern cars, but he appreciated craftsmanship in any form, and the engine she'd modified was a work of art. "Don't touch the intake manifold." He looked up. Rosalie was standing in the doorway in a grey tank top smudged with engine grease, her hair pulled back, looking less like a magazine cover and more like a person than he'd ever seen her. I wasn't going to. You were leaning toward it. I was admiring it. There's a difference. He straightened. You rebuilt this yourself? From stock, yes. She walked over, grabbed a torque wrench from the workbench, and leaned into the engine bay with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The original turbo setup was conservative. I reworked the exhaust flow, upgraded the intercooler, and retuned the ECU. It makes about twice the factory horsepower now. I understood maybe half of those words. She glanced at him, and the corner of her mouth twitched. Not a smile. A twitch. From Rosalie, that was practically a standing ovation. You're 800 years old and you don't know how a car works. I know how a horse works. Several different breeds, actually. I was very good with horses. Cars are better. They don't bite. Horses don't need gasoline. Horses can't do 160 on the straightaway. I can do 160 without either, so I never felt the need to learn. The twitch became a real smile, brief, quickly suppressed, but real. She turned back to the engine and worked in silence for a few minutes while Naruto leaned against the workbench and watched. There was something hypnotic about the way she worked. Every movement was precise, efficient, and carried a quality of care that transcended mechanics. She wasn't just fixing a car. She was creating something, pouring herself into a physical object that she could control and perfect in ways she couldn't control or perfect her own existence. Teach me, he said. She paused. What? Teach me how a car works. You clearly love this, and I clearly don't know anything about it, and I've got 800 years of things I could teach you in exchange. I don't need your charity lessons. It's not charity. It's barter. You teach me about engines, I teach you, what do you want to know? History? Languages? I speak 14. 14. 15 if you count a dialect of Sumerian that nobody else alive can verify. She put down the wrench and turned to face him fully. Her golden eyes were calculating, searching for the angle, the manipulation, the hidden cost. She'd been looking for those things since the day he arrived and hadn't found them, and Naruto could see that the absence of ulterior motives was more disorienting to her than any deception would have been. Why do you keep doing this? She asked. Doing what? Being kind. To me specifically. Alice is easy to be kind to, she's open and warm and she reciprocates immediately. Bella is easy because she's human and curious and she makes you feel needed. But I am difficult. I am cold and hostile and suspicious and I have given you every reason to write me off, and you just keep showing up. Standing in my garage. Asking me to teach you things. Do you want me to stop? I want to understand why. Naruto considered his answer carefully. Not because he didn't know the truth, but because the truth was heavy, and Rosalie had been bearing heavy things for long enough without someone else adding to the load carelessly. Because you remind me of someone, he said. Not in appearance, not in circumstance. In architecture. The way you're built. Someone I knew a long time ago who carried pain like a weapon because it was the only way he knew how to survive, and who fought the entire world because fighting was easier than feeling, and who was the best person I ever knew once he finally let someone in. Who? My best friend. His name was Sasuke. The name, spoken aloud for the first time in centuries, carried a weight that Naruto felt in his chest. Rosalie heard it too. She was perceptive enough to hear the history in a single word. What happened to him? He lived. He fought. He suffered more than any person should. He found love, eventually, and peace, eventually, and he died at 67 of something mundane and human, and I held his hand and he told me not to be an idiot about it, which was exactly the kind of thing he'd say. Naruto's voice was steady, but his eyes shimmered, and Rosalie watched with undisguised fascination as moisture gathered there, actual tears, something her body couldn't produce, forming in the eyes of the impossible creature leaning against her workbench. He blinked them back. So when I look at you and see someone brilliant and wounded and furious and good underneath all of it, yes, I keep showing up. Because I learned the hard way what happens when you don't. Rosalie stood very still. The garage was quiet except for the ticking of cooling metal and the ever-present rain on the roof. "Teach me Japanese," she said. "What?" "You said barter. I teach you cars, you teach me a language." "Japanese. It's the one you think in, isn't it?" "I can tell, sometimes your English has a rhythm underneath it that isn't English." "You notice that?" "I notice everything." She picked up the wrench again and pointed it at him like a conductor's baton. "First lesson, this is a torque wrench. It measures rotational force. The unit is foot-pounds. This engine's head bolts require 72 foot-pounds in a star pattern. Pay attention." "Yes, ma'am." "And Naruto?" "Yeah. If you tell Alice about the crying thing, I'll put this wrench through your skull." "Understood." She turned back to the engine, and he moved closer, watching her hands, learning the language of machines from a woman who was slowly, grudgingly, learning the language of letting someone in. Bella came to him on a Saturday. Not to the Cullen house, to the forest, where she'd correctly guessed he'd be. She parked her truck at a trailhead, hiked a quarter-mile in, and found him sitting on a moss-covered log reading a water-damaged paperback copy of The Count of Monte Cristo that he'd found in the hollow tree weeks ago and had been working through at human speed for the pleasure of it. "Hey," she said, slightly out of breath. He looked up. She was in hiking boots and a rain jacket, her dark hair damp, her cheeks flushed with exertion. Human. Alive. Burning with that brief, brilliant fire that immortals spent eternity missing. "Hey yourself. How'd you find me?" "Alice told me the general area. I followed the trail until it felt warm." She sat on the other end of the log. "Is that weird? The forest feels warm near you. Like the temperature changes." "It does, a little. The sensor nodes radiate heat. You're perceptive. Edward says that a lot. Usually right before he tells me something I didn't want to know." Naruto closed the book. "What's going on, Bella?" She pulled her knees up and wrapped her arms around them, a posture he'd seen her adopt when she was thinking through something difficult. For a minute she just sat, staring into the dripping green cathedral of the forest, and he let her. "Edward and I had a fight," she said. "About?" "About you, partly. About me, mostly. About," she exhaled. "He wants to turn me. I want him to turn me. We've been going back and forth about it for months. He thinks it's wrong, that he'd be damning me, that I don't understand what I'd be giving up. I think it's my choice and he needs to respect it. And where do I fit into this argument? You're the evidence that he's wrong." That's what the fight was really about, even though neither of us said it. She turned to look at him. "You're a vampire who can cry, Naruto. Who can eat food and feel warmth and sleep. You didn't lose your humanity when you were turned, you kept it. Edward's entire argument against turning me is that vampirism destroys everything human about a person, and you're walking proof that it doesn't have to. My situation is unique. I had factors that other vampires don't." "I know. He said that too. He said you're an exception that proves nothing." Her jaw tightened. "But that's not really what bothered him. What bothered him is that I used you as an argument at all. That I brought up another vampire's existence to challenge his position. He said," she paused, pressing her lips together. "He said I was being influenced. By me?" "He didn't say that directly. He's too careful with words. But the implication was there. That your presence is, disrupting things. Changing how I think." Naruto set the book aside and turned to face her fully. "Bella, I'm going to say something you might not want to hear. You always do. It's one of the things I like about you. Edward isn't wrong that I'm influencing you. Not intentionally, not manipulatively, but the effect is real. My presence has changed things. I've given you information you didn't have before, about your shield, about psychic abilities, about the range of what vampirism can look like. Information changes perspective. Changed perspective changes decisions. Edward is watching you change and he's scared, because the version of you that had less information was easier for him to protect. I don't want to be easy to protect. I know. And that's the real conflict, isn't it? It's not about me. It's not about turning. It's about whether the people who love you will let you be a full participant in your own life. Bella stared at him. The rain pattered softly on the canopy above, and somewhere in the distance a woodpecker hammered against a dead tree with metronomic persistence. How do you do that? She said. How do you just cut right through everything and find the actual thing? 800 years of listening to people. You get a feel for the shape of what they're really saying underneath what they actually say. Edward's been alive for over 100 years and he still can't do it. Edward is very smart and very perceptive and deeply, fundamentally terrified of loss. Fear makes you listen for threats instead of truths. I'm not afraid of anything, so I can hear clearly. You're not afraid of anything. I'm afraid of one thing. He looked out at the forest, and the golden warmth in his chest pulsed with something that wasn't quite pain but wasn't quite peace either. I'm afraid of mattering to people. Because when you matter to people, you can fail them, and I have been alive long enough to know that failing someone you love is the only wound that doesn't heal. Bella was quiet for a moment. Then she shifted down the log toward him, closing the distance between them to a few inches. You matter to me, she said. For whatever that's worth. You've been here 3 weeks and you matter to me. And not because you're powerful or ancient or mysterious. Because you see me. You talk to me like I'm an adult who can handle the truth. You don't hedge, you don't soften, you don't decide what I should and shouldn't know. Do you have any idea how rare that is when everyone around you is either a vampire trying to protect you or a human who doesn't know what's actually happening? Bella, I'm not done. Her brown eyes were fierce, and her mental shield hummed so strongly that Naruto could almost see it, a shimmering aura around her, invisible to anyone without his perception. I love Edward. I do. That's real and it's not going away. But loving someone doesn't mean they're the only person who gets to matter. And it doesn't mean I have to be blind to what's happening between. She gestured at the space between them. This. Whatever this is. What do you think it is? I think you care about me. I think I care about you. I think those things can be true without being a betrayal of anyone. She pushed a wet strand of hair behind her ear. I'm 17. I know that's young to you, basically embryonic. But I'm also the girl who moved to a rainy town and fell in love with a vampire and befriended werewolves and has a psychic shield and is sitting in a forest having an honest conversation with an 800-year-old nomad, so I think I've earned the right to not be condescended to about my emotional complexity. Naruto laughed. Bright and real and surprised, the way he laughed when something genuinely delighted him. You're absolutely right, he said. And for the record, you're the least embryonic 17-year-old I've ever met. And I've met a lot of them. She almost smiled. So what do? We do what we've been doing. We talk. We're honest. We let things be what they are without forcing them into categories that don't fit. And we deal with the Victoria situation, which is going to come to a head soon and is significantly more urgent than our collective romantic confusion. The mention of Victoria shifted the air between them. Bella's expression changed, not fear, exactly, but the grim awareness of someone who'd already been hunted once and knew what it felt like. Alice said she's planning something. She is. Her movements have been more structured this past week. She's mapping the gaps in our coverage, there aren't many, but she's patient. And she might be recruiting. Recruiting? There have been unusual patterns in Seattle. Disappearances that look like they could be newborn vampire activity. It's not confirmed yet, but if Victoria is building an army. Small one. Newborns. They'd be uncontrolled, powerful, and disposable. A distraction force to pull the Cullens out of position while she makes a direct play for you. Bella absorbed this with the composure that never stopped impressing him. She didn't panic. She didn't cry. She processed, evaluated, and asked the next logical question. Can you stop them? Bella, I could stop 100 newborns without breaking stride. But that's not the point. The point is making sure you and the people around you don't get caught in the crossfire. Newborns are sloppy. They kill indiscriminately. If she sends them toward Forks, humans die. Then we have to stop her before she sends them. Yes. Tonight? He looked at her, this fragile, fierce, extraordinary girl sitting on a mossy log in the rain, and he felt the third thread of gravity pull taut in his chest. Alice was spark and intuition. Rosalie was depth and healing. Bella was this, courage and clarity, a human who stared into the dark and demanded it explain itself. Soon, he said. Very soon. That night, at the Cullen house, things broke open. It started with Alice. She was standing in the living room, mid-conversation with Esme about something mundane, fabric swatches for a room she was redecorating, when her eyes went blank and her body locked rigid. The hot chocolate she was holding slipped from her fingers. Jasper caught her before the cup hit the floor, his arms around her, his face tight with concentration as he tried to stabilize her emotional state through the onslaught of whatever she was seeing. Alice. Esme's voice was sharp with concern. I see them. Alice's voice was distant, hollow, coming from whatever place her mind went when the visions took her fully. 19. No, 20. Young. Newborns. Red eyes. They're in Seattle, they're killing, someone's controlling them. A woman. Red hair. Her eyes snapped back into focus. She looked at Jasper, then at Naruto, who had come through the front door 30 seconds earlier, already aware that something was wrong because his sensor network had registered a spike of vampiric energy to the south. She's coming, Alice said. 3 days. She's bringing them all. The house erupted. Carlyle was on his feet immediately. Edward appeared from upstairs, pulling Bella behind him. She'd been doing homework in his room. Emmett came in from the garage with grease on his hands and murder in his eyes. Rosalie was right behind him, already pulling her hair back, already shifting into the cold, lethal focus that combat brought out in her. Jasper took control. He set Alice gently on the couch, kissed her forehead, and turned to the room with the quiet authority of someone who'd commanded armies. 20 newborns, he said. That's a significant force. Newborns are stronger than mature vampires for the first year, they still have their own blood in their tissues, and it gives them a physical advantage. They're also wild, undisciplined, and predictable. They charge. They grab. They bite. They don't think. You fought newborns before, Naruto said. It wasn't a question. I made newborns. Trained them. Fought beside them and against them. For decades, before I found another way to live. Jasper's voice was flat, matter of fact, but Naruto could feel the weight underneath, old guilt, old violence, carried like Rosalie's grief, folded into the structure of who he was. I know how they move. I know how to break them. We're outnumbered, Edward said. 7 against 20. 8, Naruto said. 8 against 20, and one of us is human. Edward's arm tightened around Bella. I'm not helpless, Bella said. In this fight, you are. Edward's voice was harder than he probably intended. I'm sorry, Bella, but these are newborns. One of them could kill you by accident just by being in the same room. Then I'll be in a different room. But I won't be sent away like a child while people I care about fight for their lives. She's right, Naruto said. Every head turned. Bella stays close, but out of the combat zone. Hiding her somewhere distant is exactly what Victoria wants. It isolates her, forces us to split our forces between the battle and the protection detail. We keep her near but shielded. And I'm the shield. You're too valuable in the fight to be on guard duty, Jasper said. Jasper, I can be in two places at once. Silence. Naruto held up his hands. Golden light gathered in his palms, bright enough to cast sharp shadows across the room. The energy coalesced, thickened, and between one heartbeat and the next, there were two of him. The clone stood beside the original, identical in every way, same clothes, same blue eyes, same easy posture. It looked at the room full of stunned vampires and raised a hand in a casual wave. Hi. Emmett's jaw actually dropped. Rosalie grabbed the back of the couch. Alice's eyes went wide and then wider, her visions firing so rapidly that her pupils flickered like a strobe. Edward just stared, the mind reader confronted with two identical silences where thoughts should be. Shadow clone, Naruto said. A technique from, before. Each clone has a fraction of my power, which in practical terms means each one is still faster and stronger than any vampire in this room. I can make dozens. He paused, then, because he could feel the question building, I can make hundreds. But for this fight, 5 or 6 should be enough. Enough? Emmett said. 5 or 6 of you plus 7 of us against 20 newborns. That's not a fight. That's a massacre. It's not the newborns I'm worried about. Naruto dissolved the clone, which vanished in a puff of golden light. It's Victoria. She's the strategist. She won't be in the front line, she'll hang back, watch, wait for an opening, and go for Bella directly. Her survival instinct makes her almost impossible to corner. She'll have escape routes planned, contingencies on contingencies. You've cornered things that were impossible to corner before, Alice said quietly. I have. But I want to do this right. Not just win, end it. No escape, no second chance, no coming back in 6 months with a bigger army. He looked at Carlyle. I know your principles. I know you value life, even vampire life. But these newborns were created as weapons and then they'll be abandoned. Victoria doesn't care about them. They'll rampage through the region killing humans until the Volturi step in, and the Volturi solution will be worse than mine. Carlyle's face was drawn. This was the tension at the core of him, the healer, the pacifist, confronted with the mathematics of violence. Naruto respected the struggle. He didn't share it, but he respected it. What are you proposing? Carlyle asked. I'll handle the newborns. My clones and I will engage them in the field, away from town, away from humans. Your family holds a secondary line in case any breakthrough. One clone stays with Bella. And when the field is clear, I go after Victoria personally. Alone. She only runs when she's outnumbered. If it's just me, one person, one scent, one threat to evaluate, her survival instinct has fewer variables to process. She'll fight instead of flee. And when she fights, I end it. That's a risk, Jasper said, but his tone was analytical, not objecting. He was running scenarios. It's a calculated one. And I'm the one taking it, so it's mine to calculate. Another silence. Then Jasper nodded. The plan is sound. I'd modify the positioning, I want Emmett and Rosalie on the flanks, Edward and I in the center. Carlyle and Esme as a rear guard. Alice on overwatch, feeding us real-time vision data. He looked at Alice. Can you track the battle? If Naruto's clones are involved, my visions get blurry. But I can track Victoria. She's a standard vampire, her decisions show up clearly. Good. You're our eyes on her. The moment she moves for Bella, you call it. And where do we fight? Emmett asked, cracking his knuckles with an enthusiasm that was borderline inappropriate for the gravity of the situation. "The clearing," Alice said. "The one where we play baseball. It's open, it's away from town, and the newborns will be drawn to us if we make ourselves visible. They're newborns, they won't resist the pull of multiple vampire scents in one place." 3 days, Naruto said. "We've got 3 days to prepare. Jasper, I want you to train the family in newborn combat. Tactics, weak points, how they move. Emmett, you're the muscle, I need you drilling takedowns. Rosalie, Alice, Edward, coordinated flanking patterns. Carlisle, Esme, I know combat isn't your preference, but if a newborn gets past the line and heads for town, you're the last barrier between it and 15,000 humans." He said all of this without raising his voice, without posturing, without pulling rank. But something in the room shifted, a subtle realignment, like iron filings responding to a magnet. He wasn't the leader of the Cullen coven and wasn't trying to be. But he was, without question, the most experienced combatant in the room by a margin of centuries, and when he spoke about war, even Jasper deferred. "One more thing," Naruto said. "The wolves." Carlisle inhaled. Edward's expression darkened. "They'll feel the newborns coming," Naruto continued. 20 vampires crossing into the peninsula is not something they'll miss or ignore. If we don't coordinate with them, we'll end up fighting a 3-way battle, us, the newborns, and a pack of shapeshifters who see all vampires as threats. "The treaty," Carlisle began. "The treaty handles normal circumstances. 20 newborns descending on Forks isn't normal. Carlisle, I'll talk to them. I'm not bound by your treaty, and I'm not a vampire in the way they understand vampires. Let me open a channel. You'd go to the reservation alone. I'd go to the border. They'll come to me, they've been tracking my sensor nodes for weeks. They know I'm here. They're curious." Carlisle looked around the room. One by one, the family nodded, some reluctantly, some eagerly, all with the gravity of people who understood that the next 3 days would change everything. "Do it," Carlisle said. Naruto went to the treaty line at midnight. The border between Cullen territory and Quilut land was invisible to human eyes but blazingly obvious to supernatural ones, a scar in the earth where 2 kinds of power met and agreed not to cross. Naruto stood on the Cullen side, hands in his pockets, and waited. He didn't wait long. They came out of the forest in wolf form, 4 of them, massive, the size of horses, their fur slick with rain. The lead wolf was black, the largest, with dark intelligent eyes that assessed Naruto with a complexity that went far beyond animal cognition. Behind it, a russet wolf, a gray one, and a dark brown one. Naruto felt their heat from 20 yards away. These weren't vampires, they burned like furnaces, their body temperature impossibly high, their energy tied to the earth in ways that reminded him viscerally of sage chakra. Something ancient lived in their blood, something that predated vampires and would probably outlast them. The black wolf stopped 10 yards from the border. It stared at him. Naruto stared back. "I know you can understand me," Naruto said. "And I know you can shift to talk. I'm not going to ask you to, that's your call. But I have information you need, and a proposal that benefits both our sides." The black wolf held his gaze for a long moment. Then the air shimmered, bones cracked and reformed, and where the wolf had been stood a tall, muscular young man, maybe 20, maybe younger, with dark skin and darker eyes and an expression of guarded authority. He was shirtless, wearing only cut-off shorts, and the rain ran down his body without seeming to bother him. "Sam Yuli," the young man said. "Alpha of the Quilut pack. And you're the thing that's been planting golden lights in our forest. Naruto Uzumaki. Nomad. And those lights are sensor nodes, they're there to track a threat, not to spy on your territory. If any of them crossed the treaty line, that was unintentional, and I apologize. 3 of them crossed. Then I'll move them tonight." Sam studied him. Behind him, the 3 wolves hadn't shifted, they stood in a loose formation, watchful, ready. The russet wolf, Naruto noticed, was watching him with an intensity that felt personal. Something about this one was different, younger, hotter, vibrating with a restless energy that the others had learned to control. "You don't smell like them," Sam said. "The Cullens. You smell like, I don't know what you smell like. Not vampire. Not human. Something else. Something else is accurate. The elders are nervous. A new presence this close to our land, allied with the Cullens, it changes the balance. I understand that. I'm not here to change the balance. I'm here because in 3 days, 20 newborn vampires are going to cross into the peninsula, and if we don't cooperate, people are going to die. Your people. The humans in Forks. Everyone." Sam's expression didn't change, but his body stilled in a way that communicated the information had landed. "Explain." Naruto explained. "Victoria, the newborns, the army, the target, the plan." He laid it out concisely, without editorializing, respecting Sam's intelligence and his time. When he finished, Sam was quiet for a long moment. "Why should we trust the Cullens?" Sam asked. "You don't have to trust them. Trust me. I'm not a Cullen. I'm not bound by their treaty or their politics. I'm a guy who wandered into this mess and decided to help, and I am telling you, straightforwardly, honestly, that this fight needs both sides. And what do we get out of it? 20 fewer vampires in your territory. A safer reservation. And a precedent for cooperation that might prevent the next crisis from being worse." The russet wolf growled softly. Sam glanced back at it and something passed between them, packed communication, silent and instantaneous. "We'll fight," Sam said. "Not for the Cullens. For our land and our people. You coordinate. We take our orders from you, not from them. Done. And after this is over, you and I are going to have a longer conversation about what exactly you are and what you want here. Looking forward to it." Sam held out his hand. Naruto took it. The shapeshifter's grip was furnace hot, and when their hands met, something happened, a pulse of gold light from Naruto and a pulse of earthy, wild heat from Sam, meeting and recognizing each other as something older than either of them, something that belonged to the land. Sam's eyes widened. "What, old energy? From a world that's gone. It's not hostile. It's saying hello." Sam stared at their joined hands for a long moment. Then he released his grip, stepped back, and shifted, bones cracking, body expanding, black fur erupting, until the wolf stood before Naruto again. It dipped its massive head once, turned, and vanished into the forest. The 3 other wolves followed, and within seconds, the night was empty. Naruto stood at the treaty line and breathed the cold, wet air and felt the pieces of the plan click into place. Cullens to the center. Wolves on the flanks. His clones in the field. One clone with Bella. And him, personally, hunting Victoria through whatever maze she'd built. 2 days now. 2 days until the newborns came. 2 days until this quiet, rainy town became a battlefield. He turned toward the Cullen house and ran. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Jasper ran combat drills in the clearing, the same clearing where the battle would take place, so the family could learn the terrain. He was a different person in combat mode, Naruto observed. The quiet, reserved empath became sharp and commanding, his southern accent thickening as he barked instructions, his body moving with the lethal fluidity of a creature built for killing. He paired Emmett against Edward, Rosalie against Alice, and demonstrated newborn tactics with a clinical precision that made clear he'd lived through more violence than anyone else in the family could imagine. Anyone except Naruto. They sparred once. Just once. Jasper wanted to test himself against the unknown, and Naruto respected the impulse. They squared off in the clearing at dusk on the second day, while the rest of the family watched from the tree line. Jasper moved first, a feint to the left, a burst of speed to the right, classic misdirection from someone who'd fought hundreds of vampire battles. Naruto read it like text on a page and was already moving, not away from the attack but into it, closing the distance so fast that Jasper's strike met empty air while Naruto appeared behind him with one hand resting lightly on the back of his neck. "Dead," Naruto said gently. Jasper spun, and this time he was serious, the full repertoire, speed and strength and a wave of projected fear that would have paralyzed a normal opponent. Naruto felt the emotional assault hit him like a wall of ice and simply burned through it, his golden energy flaring warm against Jasper's empathic influence and dissolving it like sunlight through fog. The physical attack he redirected with a single movement, a turn of the wrist, a shift of the hip, that sent Jasper tumbling across the clearing with such precise force that he landed on his feet rather than his face. Jasper stared at him from across the clearing. Then he straightened, dusted off his shirt, and said, "I've never been outclassed that completely. Not even by Maria." "You're excellent," Naruto said, and he meant it. "Your technique is the best I've seen in this world. You read body language like a second language and your empathic combat integration is genuinely innovative. But you're fighting within the limits of what you think is possible. You've sparred with vampires your entire life, so your ceiling is vampire speed, vampire strength, vampire reflexes. Against me, those limits don't apply. You need to throw out your assumptions and fight like you're facing something you've never seen before, because you are." Jasper absorbed this. Then he nodded, and something shifted in his eyes, not defeat but recalibration, a soldier updating his model of the world. "When this is over," Jasper said, "I'd like to train with you. Regularly." "I'd like that too." They shook hands, and Naruto felt the first bridge being built between them, not romantic, not competitive, but something perhaps rarer. Mutual recognition. Two warriors, centuries apart, speaking the same language. The night before the battle, Naruto couldn't settle. He'd seeded another 60 sensor nodes, bringing the total to over 100. The perimeter was airtight. The wolves were in position. Sam had a patrol running the reservation border and 2 wolves stationed along the eastern approach. The Cullens had drilled until even Carlyle could execute a credible flanking maneuver. Everything was ready. And yet, he was standing on the Cullens' back porch, staring at the forest, when the door opened behind him and 3 people stepped out. Alice. Rosalie. Bella. They arranged themselves around him without discussion, as if they'd planned it, which they hadn't. Alice took the spot to his left, close enough that her arm brushed his. Rosalie leaned against the railing to his right, not touching him but present, there, in a way that she hadn't been 3 weeks ago. Bella sat on the porch steps below him, her back against the railing post, looking out at the same dark forest. Nobody spoke for a while. "I'm not going to let anything happen to any of you," Naruto said. "We know," Alice said. "We don't need you to protect us," Rosalie said. "We just need you to come back," Bella said. He looked down at Bella, then at Rosalie, then at Alice. 3 faces, 3 kinds of gravity, 3 women who had claimed parts of him he'd thought were permanently closed. The spark. The depth. The courage. Different facets of the same impossible thing, the thing he'd been walking away from for 700 years because it hurt too much to hold. "I'll come back," he said. "That's a promise." "You said you don't break promises," Rosalie said. "I don't." Alice took his hand. Rosalie let her shoulder rest against his arm, a deliberate, conscious contact that cost her something and was worth what it cost. Bella reached up from the steps and put her hand on his knee, light, warm, human. 4 people on a porch, in the rain, on the edge of a battle. Naruto closed his eyes and let himself feel it, the warmth, the connection, the terrifying, beautiful weight of mattering to people who mattered to him. In his chest, the golden energy pulsed. Steady. Ready. Tomorrow. Chapter 4. What stays? The morning came gray and still, the way mornings in Forks always came, except today the forest was holding its breath. Naruto felt them at 4:47 a.m. 22 signatures. Victoria had added 2 more in the final days, crossing into the peninsula from the south, moving fast through the deep timber, a loose pack formation with no discipline and no coordination. They ran like what they were, newborns, barely weeks old most of them, driven by hunger and the fading compulsion of whoever had pointed them north and said go. Their emotional signatures were a wall of noise, rage, confusion, bloodlust, pain, the howling disorientation of creatures ripped from human life and shoved into something monstrous without explanation. Behind them, 20 miles back and moving with careful, deliberate slowness, was Victoria. Naruto opened his eyes. He was in the Cullen living room, sitting in his chair, and around him the family was already moving. Alice had seen it too. She'd gasped awake from a vision trance on the couch at 4:45 and said, now, in a voice that carried through the house like a bell. Jasper was first to the door. He'd slept in his clothes, had he slept at all? And his face had the focused, emptied-out quality of a man who'd set aside everything that wasn't the next 12 hours. Emmett was right behind him, and Rosalie behind Emmett, and Carlyle and Esme moved together with the quiet synchronicity of 2 people who'd been partners for centuries. Edward came downstairs with Bella. She was dressed in layers, practical clothes, hiking boots. She'd slept at the Cullen house. Charlie had been told she was staying with Alice, which was technically true, and she looked like she hadn't slept much either. But her eyes were clear and her jaw was set and she was not shaking. Naruto stood. 22 newborns, coming from the south. They'll hit the clearing in about 90 minutes at their current speed. Victoria is trailing them, she'll hold back until the fighting starts and then circle for Bella. He looked at each person in turn. Jasper's plan holds. Cullens take the center line. Wolves on the eastern flank. Sam confirmed 10 minutes ago through the sensor network that his pack is in position. 6 wolves. 6. Emmett raised his eyebrows. Last count was 4. 2 more shifted in the last 48 hours. Young ones. The proximity of 22 vampires triggered the change. Naruto paused. That's going to be a complicated conversation for some families on the reservation after today, but it's not our problem right now. He raised his hands and the room filled with golden light. 5 shadow clones materialized around him, identical, solid, each radiating the same warm energy as the original. The Cullens had seen this before, during planning, but the reality of 6 Narutos standing in their living room still produced a moment of collective silence. Clones 1 through 4 deploy to the field, Naruto said, and 4 of the clones moved toward the door with fluid purpose. Clone 5 stays with Bella. The 5th clone stepped toward Bella and gave her a small, reassuring nod. She looked at him, because the clones weren't empty copies, they carried his warmth and his awareness and his personality, and nodded back. And you? Alice asked. I'll be in the field for the opening engagement. Once the newborns are committed and the line is holding, I break off and hunt Victoria. He met Alice's eyes. You're my eyes on her. The moment she moves, you call it. I will. Rosalie. He turned to her. She was standing by the door, her hair braided back, her beautiful face locked into the cold, sharp focus that he'd come to recognize as her war face. You anchor the right flank. Emmett's going to push forward, that's his instinct, and it's the right one. But someone needs to hold the line behind him. That's you. I know my job, she said. I know you do. I'm saying it out loud because I want everyone to hear it. You're the backbone of the right side. If that flank holds, the newborns can't encircle us. Something moved across her face, not softness, not here, not now, but acknowledgement. Recognition. He'd just told a room full of people that she was essential, not because she was beautiful or angry or difficult, but because she was strong, and he'd said it like a fact rather than a compliment. Move out, Jasper said, and the family flowed through the door and into the gray morning. The clearing was a wide, flat meadow ringed by old-growth forest, maybe 300 yards across. The Cullens played baseball here during thunderstorms. The crack of a vampire bat hitting a vampire-pitched ball was loud enough to need cover. Today it would serve a different purpose. Naruto's 4 clones spread across the field in a loose diamond formation, each one standing relaxed and still, golden energy shimmering faintly around them in the pre-dawn gray. The Cullens took their positions, Jasper and Edward in the center, Emmett and Rosalie on the right flank, Carlyle and Esme on the left. Alice stood on a slight rise at the rear, her eyes distant, tracking the future in real time. From the east, Naruto felt the wolves arrive, 6 massive shapes moving through the forest like living shadows, taking position along the tree line. Sam's black form was visible for a moment between the trunks, and Naruto sent a pulse of golden energy in acknowledgement. The wolf dipped its head and vanished into the undergrowth. The original Naruto stood at the forward point of the clearing, ahead of everyone, alone. He'd removed his jacket. The Henley underneath was dark, and in the gray light his skin carried that faint golden luminescence, not sparkling, not refracting, but glowing, as if the sun was inside him rather than behind the clouds. He could feel them coming. The ground beneath his feet transmitted their approach as vibration, 22 sets of vampire feet hitting the earth at full sprint, an approaching cavalry charge of newborn fury. They were close now. 5 miles. 4. 3. Here they come, Alice called from the rise, her voice carrying clear and bright across the meadow. 90 seconds. They're going to hit the tree line in a wave, no formation, no strategy. Just a charge. Perfect, Emmett said, and cracked his knuckles so loudly it echoed off the trees. Remember, Jasper called, they'll go for the grab. Don't let them get their arms around you. Strike, move, strike again. Use their momentum against them. They're stronger than you for about 3 seconds, after that, their technique falls apart because they don't have any. Naruto closed his eyes. The sensor network fed him a perfect 3-dimensional map of the approaching force, each newborn a red dot of furious energy, moving in a loose cluster, 5 out front moving faster than the rest, the eager ones, the hungry ones. He opened his eyes. Bella, he said, and his voice was quiet but it carried, resonating through the golden energy that connected him to his clone at the Cullen house. The clone was standing on the back porch with Bella, who had refused to wait inside. You okay? A pause. Then Bella's voice, transmitted through the clone's awareness, I'm okay. Go. The tree line exploded. They came through the forest like a breaking wave, branches snapping, trunks cracking, the earth tearing under their feet. 22 newborn vampires, red-eyed and feral, their faces twisted with hunger and confusion and the savage, unthinking violence of creatures less than a month old. Some of them still wore the clothes they'd been turned in, jeans and t-shirts, and one still had a backpack, absurdly, bouncing on its shoulders as it ran. They were someone's children. Someone's friends. Someone's lovers, 3 weeks ago, before Victoria found them in the alleys and shelters and dark corners of Seattle and turned them into weapons. Naruto looked at them and felt a grief so old and deep it was almost geological. He'd seen this before. People turned into tools, children turned into soldiers, lives consumed by someone else's war. He'd fought against it his entire existence, and here it was again, wearing new faces in a new world, and it still hurt the same way. Then the first newborn reached the clearing and lunged for him with its arms wide and its mouth open and its red eyes seeing nothing but prey, and Naruto stopped grieving and started moving. He caught the first one by the throat. Gently, or as gently as you could catch something moving at 60 miles an hour. His hand closed around its neck and he redirected its momentum into the ground, cratering the earth beneath it, stunning it. His other hand came up and a seal flared gold across his palm, an immobilization technique adapted from Fuinjutsu, modified over centuries to work on vampire physiology. The golden seal sank into the newborn's chest and its body locked, rigid and helpless, eyes still rolling with fury but limbs frozen. He'd told the Cullens he would handle the newborns. He hadn't told them exactly how. The second and third newborns hit him simultaneously, and he split them apart with a burst of golden energy that sent both tumbling across the clearing. Clone 1 intercepted the second, pinning it and applying the seal. Clone 2 caught the third mid-tumble and drove it into the earth. The remaining 19 hit the clearing in a ragged wave, and the battle began in earnest. It was not, by any objective measure, a fair fight. The Cullens were disciplined, trained, and fighting on home ground. Jasper moved through the newborns like a scalpel, precise, devastating, targeting joints and tendons with strikes that disabled without destroying. Edward read their intentions before they formed and was already moving to counter before they'd committed. Emmett was a wrecking ball, pure force, grabbing newborns and throwing them with enough strength to clear the tree line. Rosalie held the right flank exactly as Naruto had asked, catching every newborn that tried to circle Emmett's charges and putting them down with a ruthless efficiency that was almost beautiful. Carlyle fought like someone who hated fighting but was very, very good at it, defensive, precise, merciful where mercy was possible. Esme surprised everyone, including herself, by tearing the arm off a newborn that got past Carlyle's guard and was heading for Alice's position. She stared at the severed limb in her hand for a frozen moment before dropping it and re-engaging. The wolves hit the eastern flank like a natural disaster. 6 enormous shapeshifters, each one a furnace of speed and power and tooth and claw, tore into the newborns with a ferocity that made even Emmett pause. Sam's black wolf tackled 2 newborns at once and drove them both to the ground. The russet wolf, Jacob, Naruto had learned, fought with a personal fury that suggested this battle meant more to him than territory or alliance. And through it all, Naruto and his clones moved. He didn't fight the way the Cullens fought, or the way the wolves fought. He moved through the battlefield like weather, present everywhere, touching everything, impossible to pin down. A newborn lunged at Jasper's back and Naruto was there, catching it by the ankle and swinging it into the ground so hard the impact sent cracks radiating through the frozen earth. 2 newborns tried to overwhelm Rosalie from both sides and Clone 3 appeared between them, a hand on each chest, golden seals flaring, both of them dropping like puppets with cut strings. He was sealing them, not killing them. One by one, the golden Fuinjutsu marks spread across the battlefield like flowers blooming in fast forward, each sealed newborn locked in rigid paralysis, alive but helpless, their red eyes rolling with fury and terror and confusion. Jasper noticed first. "You're not destroying them. They didn't choose this." Naruto caught another one, sealed it, set it down almost gently on the grass. "Victoria chose for them. They're victims, not soldiers. They'll kill you if you let them up. Then I won't let them up until they calm down. Newborns stabilize after the first year, you know that better than anyone. Once the initial frenzy passes, they can be reasoned with. You're going to rehabilitate 22 feral vampires. I'm going to give them the option. More than anyone gave them when they were turned." He caught another one, this one barely looked 16, a girl with short dark hair and torn jeans and the desperate, terrified eyes of someone who had no idea what was happening to her. His seal settled into her chest and she went rigid, and he laid her on the ground beside the others with a care that made Jasper's jaw tighten. The battle was nearly over. 12 minutes had passed. 18 newborns were sealed and immobilized. 2 had been killed, one by the wolves, who fought with less restraint than the Cullens, and one by Emmett, who'd been forced to decapitate a newborn that had gotten its arms around his neck and was squeezing with lethal intent. The remaining 2 were fleeing south, pursued by Clone 4 and 2 wolves. Naruto stood in the center of the clearing, surrounded by paralyzed newborns, and turned his attention south. Victoria. She was 3 miles out and closing. Alice had been tracking her throughout the battle, calling out updates from the rise, and Victoria's movements had followed exactly the pattern Naruto predicted. She'd hung back during the initial engagement, circled east to test the wolf line, been repelled by the sheer density of the pack, and was now driving north toward the Cullen house on a route that skirted the edge of the clearing. She wasn't going for the battle. She was going for Bella. "Alice." Naruto called. "I see her." She's taking the river, following it north toward the house. She'll be there in 4 minutes. Clone 5, status. The clone at the house responded through their shared awareness. Bella's inside. I'm on the porch. I feel Victoria approaching from the south-southeast. 3 minutes. Naruto looked at the clearing. The Cullens were finishing, Jasper and Edward restraining the last engaged newborn while Carlyle checked on Esme, who had taken a bite to the forearm that was already healing. The wolves had reformed at the tree line, panting, blood on their muzzles. The fight here was done. Hold the field, Naruto said to Jasper. I'm going after her. He didn't wait for a response. He moved, real speed, full speed, the kind that turned the world into a streak of color and sound. The 3 miles between the clearing and the Cullen house vanished in a breath. Trees blurred. The river flashed silver beneath him as he crossed it in a single leap. The sensor network fed him Victoria's position in real time. She was fast, desperately fast, her survival instinct pushing her body to its absolute limit as she sprinted through the forest toward her target. He intercepted her a half-mile from the house. The impact when he dropped into her path wasn't physical, he simply appeared, standing in the middle of the game trail she was running along, and the shockwave of his arrival sent leaves and debris spiraling outward in a ring. Victoria skidded to a halt, her bare feet carving furrows in the earth, and for one frozen moment they faced each other in the green gloom of the old-growth forest. She was exactly what he'd expected. Red hair, wild and tangled, framing a face that was sharp and feral and intelligent, that was the thing people underestimated about Victoria. She wasn't a beast. She was a strategist who looked like a beast, and the animal appearance was as much a weapon as her speed or her survival instinct. Her red eyes swept over him with the rapid, calculating assessment of a predator evaluating a threat, and he watched her gift fire in real time, that preternatural survival instinct processing him, analyzing him, searching for the angle of escape. It told her to run. She spun, and she was fast, genuinely fast, one of the quickest vampires he'd ever seen. Her gift didn't just warn her of danger, it optimized her evasion, choosing the path that maximized her chances of escape with a precision that was almost supernatural. She was through the gap between 2 cedars and sprinting east before most vampires would have finished turning. Naruto was already there. She tried south. He was there. West. There. She tried climbing, straight up a 200-foot spruce, moving like a spider, and he was waiting at the top, sitting on a branch, looking at her with an expression that wasn't anger or triumph but something she clearly didn't know how to process. Patience. Victoria clung to the trunk 50 feet below him, her claws dug into the bark, her red eyes wide. Her survival instinct was screaming, he could see it in the frantic calculation behind her gaze, the gift cycling through options and finding nothing, no path, no angle, no escape. For maybe the first time in her existence, the instinct that had kept her alive through centuries of danger was returning null. There was no way out of this. Victoria, Naruto said from his branch, and his voice was calm and warm and carried through the rain-heavy air without effort. Stop running. She hissed. Her body coiled for another burst of speed, another desperate attempt to find the gap that didn't exist. There is no gap, he said, answering her body language as if she'd spoken. I can feel every shift of your weight, every contraction of your muscles. I know where you're going to go before your body commits to it. Your gift is impressive, truly, it is. I've never seen a survival instinct that's sophisticated. But it's designed to find escape routes, and right now, there are none. You can run until your legs give out, and you'll never get more than 10 feet from me. What are you? She snarled, and her voice was rough, ragged, nothing like the polished tones of the Cullens. This was a vampire who lived in the wild, who hadn't bothered with human affectation in a long time. Someone who's been where you are. Chasing revenge. Consumed by it. Letting it eat everything else until there's nothing left but the hunt. He dropped from the branch, falling 50 feet and landing on a neighboring trunk at her level, close enough to touch her. She flinched back but didn't bolt, her instinct had finally stopped telling her to run, because it had accepted that running wasn't an option. I lost people too, Victoria. People I loved more than anything. And I spent years, decades, carrying that loss like a weapon, looking for someone to point it at. James is dead. Your friends killed him. James tried to kill an innocent girl for sport. The Cullens stopped him. That's not murder. That's intervention. He was my mate. I know. Naruto's voice softened, and something in Victoria's wild eyes flickered, a crack in the pharaoh mask, a flash of something raw and wounded underneath. I know what it is to lose your mate. I know the hole it leaves, and I know how the rage rushes in to fill it because rage is easier than grief. But Victoria, building an army of children, turning innocent people into monsters, sending them to die in a fight they didn't choose, that's not justice. That's not even revenge. That's just cruelty wearing grief's clothes. You don't know anything about me. I know you were a survivor long before James. I know your gift kept you alive through things that would have killed any other vampire. I know that somewhere under all of this, the rage, the obsession, the 3 months of circling this territory like a wounded animal, there's a person who's in pain and doesn't know how to stop. Victoria's claws tightened on the bark. The tree groaned beneath her grip. Rain ran down her face, plastering her red hair to her skull, and in that moment she looked less like a predator and more like a drowning woman. Let me help you, Naruto said. Help me. The words came out bitter, broken. You just destroyed my army in 15 minutes. I sealed them. They're alive. Immobilized, but alive. When they stabilize, when the newborn frenzy passes, they'll be given the choice to learn a different way. The Cullens' way, or their own way, but a way that doesn't involve killing. And me? That's up to you. She stared at him. The rain fell. The forest breathed. You could kill me, she said, and it wasn't fear in her voice. It was almost curiosity. Testing. I could. Easily. But killing you doesn't fix anything. It doesn't bring James back. It doesn't undo the newborns. It doesn't make Bella safer, because Bella was never really in danger, not from you, not with me here. He held her gaze. Victoria, you can walk away. Right now. Leave the peninsula, leave the revenge, leave all of it. Go somewhere far and quiet and grieve properly, the way you haven't let yourself since James died. I won't follow you. The Cullens won't follow you. If you ever come back with hostile intent, I'll stop you again, but I won't hunt you. Why? The question was almost a whisper. Because I've killed enough people who were just in pain. Because mercy is the only thing I've found in 800 years that actually makes the world less terrible. And because you deserve better than dying in a forest in Washington over a man who didn't deserve your devotion in the first place. That last sentence hit her like a physical blow. She recoiled, and for a moment Naruto thought she was going to attack. Her muscles coiled, her jaw clenched, and a snarl built in her throat that vibrated through the tree trunk. Then it broke. The snarl became a sound that wasn't a snarl at all, a ragged, tearing noise that was the vampire equivalent of a sob, dry and airless because her body couldn't produce tears, but devastating in its rawness. She pressed her face against the bark and made that sound, and the forest absorbed it, and Naruto waited. He waited a long time. When she finally looked up, her red eyes were clearer. Not golden, she was centuries from that, if she ever chose it, but present in a way they hadn't been before. The obsessive, single-minded fixation had cracked, and through the crack something older and more tired was visible. If I leave, she said, and I come back, not for revenge, not for Bella, just, if I come back, then you come back. And we talk. She held his gaze for another long moment. Then her hands released the bark, and she dropped, a controlled fall, 50 feet to the forest floor, and landed in a crouch. She stood. Looked up at him one more time. You're wrong about James, she said. He was cruel and he was selfish and he wasn't worth any of this. But he was mine, and that mattered. It mattered, Naruto agreed. Victoria turned south and ran. Her survival instinct, freed from the null loop of no escape, propelled her with blistering speed through the forest, away from Forks, away from the clearing, away from the territory she'd circled for months. Naruto tracked her through the sensor network, 5 miles, 10, 20, 30, until she crossed the southern edge of his perimeter and disappeared into the wider world. He let her go. Standing on the branch, alone in the rain, he exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Then he dropped to the ground and ran back to the clearing. The aftermath was controlled chaos. 20 sealed newborns lay in the clearing like a macabre art installation, each one rigid and paralyzed, golden fuinjutsu marks glowing faintly on their chests. 2 had been destroyed during the battle. The remaining 20 would need to be managed, contained, and eventually, if Naruto's plan worked, rehabilitated. The Cullens were gathered near the tree line, various states of damage visible. Esme's forearm bite had healed. Emmett had a crack in his shoulder that was already knitting. Jasper was unmarked but vibrating with residual adrenaline, his empath ability still processing the emotional shockwave of 20 feral minds in close proximity. Alice was sitting on the ground, her eyes flickering between present and future as she processed the cascading decision trees that the battle's outcome had set in motion. Edward stood apart from the group. His eyes found Naruto the moment he entered the clearing. "Victoria?" Edward asked. "Gone. Alive. Not coming back." Edward's expression tightened. "You let her go. I gave her a choice. She chose to leave. She's a killer. She created 22 newborns, at least half of whom probably murdered people during their first days. She'll grieve. She'll wander. She'll either find a new way to live or she won't, and that's her choice to make." Naruto's voice was even but carried finality. "I'm not an executioner, Edward. I don't kill people whose crime is grief. That's not, Edward." Carlyle stepped forward, and his voice was quiet but immovable. It was his call to make. He was the one in the field, and he made a judgment. "I support it." Edward looked at Carlyle, then at Bella. Clone 5 had brought her to the clearing once the fighting ended, and she stood near the tree line, pale but composed, taking in the scene with those serious brown eyes. Something passed between Edward and Bella, a look, a question, a negotiation conducted entirely in the language of a couple who'd been through enough together to communicate without words. Bella nodded. Once. Whatever Edward was asking permission for, she'd granted it. He turned back to Naruto. "I don't agree with your decision. But I understand it. And he paused, the words clearly costing him something. "Thank you. For protecting her. For protecting all of us. You're welcome." The wolves withdrew first. Sam's black form appeared at the eastern tree line, flanked by 5 others, and they held position for a long moment, a silent acknowledgement of shared battle, shared blood, shared ground. Then they melted back into the forest. The alliance had been temporary, pragmatic, and exactly what both sides needed. Jacob, the russet wolf, lingered. His dark eyes found Bella across the clearing, and Naruto felt the complicated tangle of emotion that passed between them, old love, old hurt, loyalty, loss, something that would never fully resolve but would never fully break either. Then Jacob turned and followed his pack into the trees. Naruto walked to the center of the clearing and knelt beside the sealed newborns. 20 faces looked up at him, some furious, some terrified, some blank with the dissociative shock of creatures who'd been ripped from one existence and thrown into another without consent or preparation. The girl. The young one with the short dark hair and torn jeans. She was closest to him, and her red eyes tracked his face with an intelligence that cut through the newborn frenzy. "Can you hear me?" Naruto asked her. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, but her eyes focused on him with desperate clarity. "I know you're scared. I know you're hungry and confused and everything hurts. I know a woman with red hair found you in a bad place and promised you something, strength, maybe, or escape, or just an end to whatever pain you were in, and what she gave you instead was this. He placed his hand on the seal on her chest, and it pulsed warm under his palm. I'm going to help you. Not right now you're too volatile, and if I release you, the hunger will take over and you'll kill the first living thing you find. But in time, weeks, maybe months, the worst of it will pass, and then we'll talk. I'll give you the same choice I give everyone, be what you want to be. All I ask is that you don't hurt anyone while you figure it out. Her eyes shimmered. Not tears, vampires couldn't cry, but something raw and overwhelmed and desperately, achingly young. Carlyle, Naruto said without looking up. I'm going to need your help with them. All of them. This is going to be a long-term project. I'm already planning the logistics. Carlyle's voice was warm with a particular kind of energy that Naruto recognized, the energy of a healer presented with patience. We'll need space. Secure, isolated. Somewhere they can be contained safely during the transition period. I know a place. Old military installation on one of the islands in the strait. Abandoned, concrete, defensible. I'll set up a seal barrier, nothing gets in or out without my say. You're talking about a rehabilitation facility for newborn vampires. Jasper's voice was flat, but underneath the flatness Naruto could hear something complicated, a man confronted with the possibility that the weapons he'd once built could be unmade. That's never been attempted. First time for everything. It could work. Jasper said it slowly, turning the idea over like a stone. The first year is the worst. If they can be contained through the frenzy period and given the option to feed on animals, if they have guidance, then theoretically, yes. Some of them could transition. Some, not all. Some is better than none. Yes, Naruto said. It is. He stood, and as he did, the clouds overhead did something they hadn't done in 3 weeks, they thinned. Just slightly, just enough for a shaft of pale morning sunlight to break through and hit the clearing at an angle. It caught Naruto full in the chest. His skin didn't sparkle. It glowed. A deep, warm, golden light that radiated from inside him, turning his body into a lantern, a beacon, something that burned against the gray Washington morning like a piece of the sun had gotten lost and found a home in a man-shaped thing that stood in a field full of monsters and chose mercy. Every person in the clearing, vampire, human, wolf, stopped and stared. Ha, Emmett said from the tree line. That's new. Naruto looked down at his hands, golden and luminous, and then up at the thin beam of sunlight, and then at the faces around him. Alice, whose expression was somewhere between wonder and vindication, as if every fragmented golden vision she'd had was being confirmed all at once. Rosalie, whose ice mask had cracked wide open, her lips parted, her golden eyes reflecting his light back at him. Bella, who was simply staring with the expression of a person witnessing something they'd remember for the rest of their life, however long that life turned out to be. Okay, Naruto said, slightly embarrassed for the first time in approximately 4 centuries. The sun thing. I should have mentioned the sun thing. Alice started laughing. It was bright and pure and it broke the tension in the clearing like a stone through glass, and then Emmett was laughing, and then Bella was laughing, and even Jasper cracked a smile, and Rosalie shook her head and looked away, but not before Naruto caught the smile she was trying to hide. The cloud closed. The light faded. Naruto stood in the clearing, surrounded by paralyzed newborns and laughing vampires and the lingering warmth of a sun that seemed to have a sense of timing. The battle was over. The work was just beginning. The days after the battle were a strange, suspended time, the held breath between crisis and normalcy, when the adrenaline has faded but the new reality hasn't fully settled. Naruto and Carlyle spent 2 days setting up the island facility. The old military bunker on Destruction Island, a bleak, wind-scoured rock in the strait, was perfect, isolated, concrete reinforced, and surrounded by water that would slow any escape attempt. Naruto laid seal barriers across every surface, golden fuinjutsu marks that turned the walls into a containment matrix. The sealed newborns were transported one by one, still immobilized, and placed in individual cells that Carlyle had outfitted with what comfort was possible: mattresses, books, music players. The seal on each newborn would be gradually loosened over weeks, allowing them controlled periods of movement and feeding under supervision. Carlyle threw himself into the project with a passion that bordered on obsession. Here, finally, was something that married his medical expertise, his philosophical beliefs, and his century-long conviction that vampires were more than monsters. Jasper joined him, reluctantly at first, then with increasing investment as his military experience proved invaluable in managing the logistical challenges of containing 20 volatile predators. It was during one of these trips, Naruto returning from the island at sunset, soaking wet and smelling like salt and concrete, that he found Edward waiting for him on the Cullen's back porch. Alone. "Can we talk?" Edward said. Naruto sat on the porch railing and wrung seawater out of his jacket. "Sure." Edward didn't sit. He stood with his hands in his pockets, and for a long moment he didn't speak, and Naruto let the silence hold because this was clearly something that needed its own pace. "I can't read your mind," Edward said finally. "You know that." "It's been clarifying, in a way I didn't expect." "How so?" "I've lived with my ability for over 100 years. It's become integral. Foundational. I process the world through other people's thoughts the way a sighted person processes the world through light. Losing that with you is like going blind in one eye. Disorienting at first. But it forces you to look differently." Naruto waited. "I've been watching you instead of reading you," Edward continued. "Observing what you do, how you move, how you treat people. And I've noticed something that I find difficult." He paused. "You make the people I love more themselves. Alice is bolder. Rosalie is softer. Bella is more honest. You haven't changed them, you've revealed them. Parts of them that were always there but that our family dynamic, my dynamic with Bella, somehow kept contained. Is that a compliment or a complaint?" "Both." Edward's golden eyes met his, and Naruto saw something there that he respected deeply, a man in the process of confronting an uncomfortable truth about himself, and choosing to confront it rather than run. "I love Bella more than I've loved anything in my existence. And I've been so focused on protecting her, from the world, from our world, from herself, that I didn't realize I was also protecting her from becoming. From growing into whatever she's meant to be." "Edward, let me finish. I came out here to say two things. First, I'm not going to fight you. For Bella's attention, for Alice's attention, for anyone's attention. I spent weeks wanting to, and then I watched you give Victoria, a woman who tried to kill the person I love most, a choice, and I realized that fighting you would make me smaller than I want to be." Naruto held very still. "Second," Edward said, and his voice was careful, precise, each word placed like a stone in a wall he was building. "Bella and I talked. Extensively. About you, about us, about what she wants. She loves me. That hasn't changed. But she also cares about you in a way that's real and significant, and I don't think it's going to go away." A muscle worked in his jaw. I don't fully understand it. The idea of sharing someone's heart goes against every instinct I have. But my instincts have been wrong before. They told me to leave her, once, to protect her, and it nearly destroyed us both. So I'm trying, to let go of the instinct and trust the person." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'm not going to stand between Bella and whatever she needs. If what she needs includes you, in whatever form that takes, then I'll adapt. Because losing her by trying to contain her would be worse than sharing her with someone who makes her braver." The porch was quiet. The rain had paused, and the evening air was sharp with pine and salt and the distant tang of the ocean. "That's the hardest thing anyone said to me in centuries," Naruto said. "And I've had some very hard conversations. It's the hardest thing I've ever said. Edward almost smiled. I reserve the right to be terrible at this. I'm going to be jealous and possessive and probably insufferable about it. I'd expect nothing less. Good. Edward extended his hand. We're not friends. We're not friends, Naruto agreed, and took his hand. The handshake was firm, honest, and free of the testing pressure of their first meeting. But we might be something. Something, Edward repeated. I can work with something. He went inside. Naruto sat on the railing and watched the stars emerge through a rare gap in the clouds and thought about the staggering, terrifying bravery of a man who chose to open his hands instead of close his fists. 3 nights later, Naruto was on the roof of the Cullen house, lying on his back, watching the sky, when Alice climbed up and lay down beside him. Then Rosalie. Then Bella, who needed help with the last few feet because the roof was steep and wet, and Naruto caught her hand and pulled her up with the careful strength of someone acutely aware that one of the 4 people on this roof had breakable bones. They lay in a row on the rain-slick shingles, Alice, Naruto, Rosalie, Bella, and looked up at the sky. The clouds had thinned enough to show stars, which in Forks was practically a celestial event. This is uncomfortable, Rosalie said. I want that on the record. You climbed up here voluntarily, Alice pointed out. I climbed up here because you told me to. I suggested. You texted me roof. Now. Stars. That's not a suggestion, Alice. That's a command with punctuation. I also climbed up voluntarily, Bella said from the end of the row. And I'm the one who's actually cold, so if anyone gets to complain, it's me. Naruto shrugged off his jacket and passed it down the line. Bella wrapped it around her shoulders, and the residual warmth of his body heat, higher than human, lower than the impossible furnace of a wolf, made her sigh. They were quiet for a while. The stars turned slowly overhead, and the forest breathed around them, and somewhere in the distance an owl called, a long, low note that dissolved into the rain-washed air. I need to tell you all something, Naruto said. 3 heads turned. The Volturi know I'm here. The silence that followed was heavy. Alice's hand found his in the dark and squeezed. Rosalie went very still. Bella's breath caught, then steadied. How? Alice asked. The battle. 22 newborns appearing and then disappearing in a single day, that kind of disturbance doesn't go unnoticed. The Volturi have informants, surveillance networks, ways of monitoring large-scale vampire activity. And I've been, conspicuous. The sensor network, the golden energy, the things I've demonstrated. Word travels. He paused. I felt them 2 days ago. 2 scouts, moving into the region. High level. Dimitri and Felix. Dimitri can track anyone, Alice said, her voice tight. Any vampire in the world. He locks onto your mental signature and follows it like a GPS. He can try. Naruto's voice was calm. He won't find what he's looking for. My mental signature isn't on the frequency he scans. But he's here, and Felix is with him, and they're going to make contact. When? Rosalie asked. Tomorrow, probably. They've been circling for 2 days, cautious, observational. Dimitri is frustrated because he can't lock onto me, and Felix is bored because Felix is always bored when he's not hitting things. They'll come to the house. Should we be afraid? Bella asked. No, Naruto said, and the word was so flat and certain that it settled over the rooftop like a blanket. You should not be afraid. I will not let the Volturi touch this family. That's not a promise, that's a fact, like gravity or the speed of light. It's simply what's going to happen. Naruto, Rosalie said, and her voice had a quality he hadn't heard from her before, not fear, not hostility, but fierce protectiveness directed at him rather than against him. The Volturi aren't newborns. They're organized, they're ancient, and they have abilities that, I know what they are. I've known about the Volturi for 600 years. I've avoided them by choice, not necessity. Arrow has wanted to meet me since the 15th century, when rumors of a golden vampire first reached Volterra. He turned his head to look at her, and in the starlight his blue eyes were very bright. Rosalie, I've been holding back since I arrived here. Dramatically. The things I've shown you, the speed, the clones, the seals, the sensor network, are the equivalent of a person flexing one finger. I have not shown you what I actually am, because there's been no reason to, and because I didn't want to frighten anyone. Show us now, Bella said quietly. Bella, we deserve to know. If the Volturi are coming tomorrow, and you're standing between them and us, we deserve to know what's actually standing there. He considered this. Looked at Alice, who nodded. At Rosalie, who held his gaze and said nothing, which was its own answer. At Bella, whose human eyes couldn't see the stars as clearly as the rest of them but who was looking at him with a clarity that had nothing to do with eyesight. He sat up on the roof. Closed his eyes. And let go. The golden energy in his chest, the fusion of Kurama's chakra and vampiric venom, compressed and controlled and held in check every moment of every day for 8 centuries, expanded. It didn't explode. It bloomed, rising from his skin like heat haze, except visible, tangible, a warm golden radiance that lit the rooftop, the yard, the forest for 100 yards in every direction. The sensor network resonated with it, 100 golden nodes across 30 miles flaring in sympathy, turning the forest into a constellation of warm lights. Alice gasped. Rosalie's hand shot out and grabbed his arm, not to stop him, but to hold on. Naruto opened his eyes, and they were gold. Not blue, gold, blazing, the pupils vertical slits, and behind the gold was something vast and old and impossibly warm, an echo of a 9-tailed fox that had burned like a second sun inside a boy who refused to give up. This is what I am, he said, and his voice resonated with harmonic depth, carrying the weight of centuries. I am the last living remnant of a world that doesn't exist anymore. I carry the energy of a being that was worshipped as a god and feared as a demon and was, in the end, just my friend. I have been alive for 829 years, and in that time I have fought things that would make the Volturi look like children playing at power. I am not telling you this to boast. I am telling you this so that when they come tomorrow, you will know, with absolute certainty, that you are safe. The golden light pulsed once, warm and deep, and then receded. His eyes faded back to blue. The night returned to its normal darkness, the stars reasserting themselves overhead. Alice was trembling. Not with fear, with something that lived next door to it, something that had no name, the overwhelming experience of being close to something that vast and that kind simultaneously. She pressed her face into his shoulder and breathed him in, and he put his arm around her. Rosalie hadn't let go of his arm. Her fingers were tight, her grip strong enough to crack stone, and she was staring at him with an expression that was the most open, the most unguarded, he'd ever seen from her. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her hand on his arm said everything. Bella was crying. Quietly, steadily, tears running down her cheeks in the starlight, and she wasn't sad, he could feel that through the warmth between them. She was moved, in the deepest sense of the word, moved the way you're moved by a sunrise over a place you've never been, by music that reaches something in you that you didn't know was there. Okay, Bella said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Okay. I feel better about tomorrow. Naruto laughed. Bright and real and human, the laugh of a man who'd just shown 3 women the full weight of what he was and been met not with fear but with tears and trembling in a hand that wouldn't let go. Good, he said. So do I. Dimitri and Felix arrived at noon the next day. They came openly, walking up the Cullen driveway in their dark cloaks like a diplomatic envoy from hell. Dimitri was lean, sharp-featured, handsome in the way of all vampires, with an expression of perpetual mild amusement that masked a formidable mind. Felix was enormous, taller than Emmett, broader, moving with the lazy confidence of someone who'd rarely encountered anything he couldn't overpower. The Cullens were arrayed on the porch. Carlyle at the center, Esme beside him, the family fanned out behind. Naruto stood at the base of the porch steps, between the family and the approaching guards, relaxed and still. "Carlyle," Dimitri said with a smile that showed too many teeth. "Always a pleasure. Your hospitality is legendary, though I notice you've acquired a new piece for your collection." "Dimitri." "Felix." Carlyle's voice was measured. "You're a long way from Volterra. Ero sends his regards. And his curiosity." Dimitri's dark red eyes moved to Naruto, and the tracker's gift reached out, a subtle psychic probe, elegant and precise, trying to lock onto Naruto's mental signature. Naruto felt it brush against him like a hand sliding off glass. Dimitri's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed by a fraction. "Interesting," Dimitri said. "I can't find you. Most people can't. I find everyone. That's rather the point of me. There's a first time for everything." Felix shifted his weight, a movement that in someone his size was a statement of intent. "Ero would very much like to meet you. He extends a personal invitation to Volterra, all courtesies, all honors, a guest of the highest standing." "That's generous. Please tell Ero I appreciate the offer and I decline." Felix's expression hardened. The invitation was not a suggestion. It wasn't a question, either. Naruto's voice didn't change, still warm, still calm, still carrying the easy cadence of someone having a conversation rather than a confrontation. But something shifted in the air around him, a pressure change, like the atmospheric drop before a storm. "I'm not going to Volterra. Not today, not tomorrow, not because Ero is curious. If he wants to meet me, he's welcome to visit. I hear Forks is lovely in the spring." Dimitri and Felix exchanged a glance. This was not a response they were accustomed to. The Volturi's invitations were accepted or enforced, the concept of polite refusal was not in their operational vocabulary. "Perhaps you don't understand the nature of the invitation," Dimitri said, the pleasant mask thinning. "Ero doesn't ask lightly. When he extends his personal interest, it carries the weight of the Volturi's authority. Declining is inadvisable. I've done inadvisable things before." Naruto took a step forward, and the step was casual, unhurried, the movement of someone walking to a window to check the weather. But it brought him within arm's reach of Felix, and the size difference between them, Felix had 8 inches and 100 pounds on him, was suddenly irrelevant, because the energy that radiated from Naruto at this proximity made Felix take an involuntary step back. Felix, who had never retreated from anything in his existence, took a step back and didn't understand why. "Here's what's going to happen," Naruto said. "You're going to go back to Ero, and you're going to tell him exactly what you found. A vampire he can't track, in a territory he can't claim, surrounded by a coven he's already familiar with and a wolf pack he probably doesn't know about. You're going to tell him that I declined his invitation respectfully and that I harbor no ill will toward the Volturi. I'm not interested in their power, their politics, or their throne. I'm a nomad who found a place worth staying in, and I'd like to be left alone." "And if Ero doesn't accept that?" Dimitri asked. "Then Ero can come here himself, and we can have a conversation. A real one, face to face, without intermediaries. I'll extend every courtesy. But I won't be summoned, and I won't be collected, and I won't be added to anyone's gallery of useful things." His eyes held Dimitri's, and for just a moment, a flicker, a heartbeat, they flashed gold. "Tell him that, too." Dimitri studied him for a long, calculating moment. Then his pleasant mask reassembled, the smile returning, and he inclined his head. "I'll relay your message faithfully. Ero values honesty, even when it's unexpected." He glanced past Naruto at the Cullens on the porch. "Carlyle, my friend. You do find the most interesting strays. Goodbye, Dimitri." Dimitri turned. Felix lingered, his red eyes boring into Naruto with the frustrated intensity of a predator denied its kill. Naruto met his gaze and smiled, a warm, genuine, utterly fearless smile that Felix had no frame of reference for, and after a moment, Felix turned and followed his partner. They disappeared into the forest. Naruto tracked them through the sensor network, south, fast, leaving the territory with an urgency that suggested Demetri's assessment of the situation had been significantly more alarmed than his composed demeanor let on. That, Emmett said from the porch, was the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I once fought a bear. You fought a bear because you were bored, Emmett, Rosalie said. It doesn't count as cool. It was a big bear. Naruto climbed the porch steps and the family parted around him, not in deference, but in a natural way that people made space for someone they decided was one of them. Carlyle put a hand on his shoulder and squeezed. Esme touched his arm. Jasper nodded, and in that nod was something that had taken weeks to build, trust. Alice was waiting just inside the door. She took his hand without a word and pulled him inside, and when the door closed behind them, she went up on her toes and kissed his cheek, quick, light, certain. I saw it, she said. The future. Yours and mine and all of it. It was clear for the first time, not blurry, not golden, not fragmented. Clear. What did you see? This. Right here. This moment. You, walking through that door, staying. Her golden eyes were bright with something that looked like joy distilled to its purest form. You're staying. Alice, don't argue with the psychic. He didn't. The evening settled over Forks like a held breath releasing. The crisis was over, not permanently, not completely, because the Volturi's interest was a slow-burning fire rather than a quick one, and the newborns on Destruction Island would need months of careful rehabilitation, and somewhere in the world Victoria was running and grieving and maybe, slowly, beginning to choose differently. But for now, tonight, the immediate weight had lifted. Naruto sat on the Cullen's back porch, watching the forest darken. The sensor network pulsed gently around him, 100 golden nodes keeping watch so that, for once, he didn't have to. Bella came out first. She sat beside him on the steps, close enough that their arms touched, and he felt the warmth of her, human warmth, fragile and fierce and burning with the particular brightness of a life that was brief and knew it and insisted on mattering anyway. Edward and I talked, she said. Really talked. Not the careful, managed conversation we usually have, where he's reading everyone's thoughts and calibrating his responses. An actual conversation, just the two of us, with the door closed and his ability locked outside. How was it? Hard. Good. Necessary. She pulled her knees up. He told me what you said on the porch. About not standing in the way. I told him what I needed, which was, honestly, Naruto, what I need is to be allowed to be complicated. To love him and care about you and not have those things be in conflict. To grow up, which is hard to do when someone's trying to freeze you in amber for your own protection. What did he say? He said he's trying. And that trying is the hardest thing he's ever done, but he's going to keep doing it. She smiled, small and real. He also said you're the most annoying person he's met in 100 years, and that he respects you enormously, and that if you ever hurt me he'll find a way to set you on fire. Fair. I thought so. Rosalie came out next. She didn't sit on the steps, she leaned against the porch railing, her usual position, but closer than usual. Close enough that when Naruto looked up at her, the angle put her face against the darkening sky, and she looked like something carved from starlight and stubbornness. The Japanese lesson, she said. We missed Tuesday because of the battle. I want to reschedule. Tomorrow. Tonight. Right now. Rosalie, it's been a very long day, Naruto. She said his name the way she did everything, deliberately, with weight. I spent the last 3 weeks learning your language. I want to say something in it. He waited. She took a breath she didn't need, and said, in careful, accented, perfectly structured Japanese, Anata wa watashi no kazoku desu. You are my family. The words hung in the evening air, and Naruto felt something shift in his chest, not the golden energy, not chakra, but something older and simpler. Something that had been waiting 800 years to hear those words in any language and had finally found them in the mouth of a woman who'd learned his mother tongue to say them. "Rosalie," he said, and his voice was thick. "Don't make it weird." She looked away, but not before he saw the ghost of a smile. Alice came out last, because Alice had a sense of timing that bordered on precognition, which, in her case, it literally was. She emerged from the door already talking, carrying a blanket that she draped over Bella's shoulders and a sketchbook that she tucked under her arm, and she slotted herself into the space between Naruto and the railing with the ease of someone who'd already seen this moment and knew exactly where she fit. "I drew something," she said, opening the sketchbook. "Last night, after the roof. When my visions finally cleared." She held up the page. It was a pencil sketch, delicate, detailed, rendered with the precision of someone who'd had a century to practice. It showed a house. Not the Cullen house, something different. Something new. Set in a forest clearing, surrounded by old-growth trees, with large windows that caught the light and a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. It looked like a place designed for someone who wanted to see the sky and be surrounded by trees and have room for people to gather. "I saw this," Alice said. "Your house. Our house. In the clearing where we fought, after the land heals, after the grass grows back. 3 years from now, maybe 4. I saw it clearly, every detail, and when I woke up I drew it before I could lose it." Naruto looked at the drawing. At the house that a psychic vampire had seen in a future that included him. That included all of them. "You drew a porch," he said. "You like porches." "I do. I really do." "There's a garage," Rosalie said, looking at the sketch over his shoulder. "Detached. That's mine." "Obviously," Alice said. Bella leaned over to look. "There's a garden." "There's a garden," Alice confirmed. "Esme's idea. She's going to insist." "I can't garden. I kill everything I touch." "You'll learn." Alice closed the sketchbook and looked at Naruto. "This is what I see. This is the future, not all of it, not the details, not the challenges or the heartbreaks or the Volturi or the complicated conversations we haven't had yet. But the foundation. The thing underneath all of it. A place. A home. People who chose to stay." Naruto looked out at the dark forest. His forest, now. His sensor nodes pulsed in the trees like golden stars, watching, waiting, keeping the borders of a territory he'd never planned to claim. Inside the house behind him, he could feel the Cullen family, Carlisle and Esme in the kitchen, doing something unnecessary and domestic. Emmett and Jasper watching something on television, arguing about it in low voices. Edward at his piano, playing something soft and knew that he was composing in real time, working through his feelings the way he always did, through music. And here, on the porch, 3 women who had reached into the locked, guarded, 800-year-old vault of his heart and found what was still alive inside it. Alice, who saw the future and chose to walk toward the brightness. Rosalie, who had learned his language to call him family. Bella, who demanded honesty and gave it back and burned with a human fire that reminded him why he'd loved being alive in the first place. "I was born in a village called Konoha," Naruto said quietly. "The village hidden in the leaves. It sat in a forest a lot like this one, tall trees, green canopy, dappled light. The people there were warriors and scholars and farmers and fools, and they built something beautiful, and it lasted as long as it could, and then it ended." The 3 women listened. The night listened. The forest listened. "I've been walking since it ended. 700 years of walking, looking for something I couldn't name. I thought it was a place. Then I thought it was a purpose. Then I thought it was a person." He paused, and the golden warmth in his chest was so full it almost hurt. It wasn't any of those things. It was a feeling. The feeling of being known, fully, honestly, with nothing hidden, and being wanted anyway. That was what Konoha was. Not the buildings or the borders or the politics. It was the feeling of people choosing each other, every day, against every reason not to. He looked at Alice. At Rosalie. At Bella. I found it again. Alice's hand tightened in his. Rosalie's shoulder pressed against his arm. Bella's hand found his knee, light and warm, anchoring him to the present moment with the simple gravity of human touch. The rain started again. Of course it did, this was Forks, and the rain never really stopped, it just waited for the right moment to remind you that some things were constant and reliable and would be there whether you wanted them or not. Naruto tipped his head back and let it fall on his face, and for the first time in 800 years, he wasn't walking. He was home.